that you got to look long term as well as can you keep 6 or 7 centre halves happy, even if you decide to go and play 3 at the back. So do you have some big decisions to make over the next week or so?
Yeah, I think there will be. I think you always have to understand that as much as we want to try and build our own team, you have to respect the individual as well, their careers. There'll be times where players will think, okay, maybe I need to move and play a bit more football, or maybe a decision comes from outside. You know, there's things that happen in football while the windows are open. That's what happens. But we're happy with the group we've got. We're happy with the dynamic at the moment. We want to try and improve from last year, and you need good players to do that. And Shane certainly is a good player.
You've got 2 good young Irish players with you as well. Aaron Connolly obviously was a bit of a revelation at times last season, particularly those 2 goals against Tottenham. When you talk about your relationship with players and helping them develop, can you talk to us about Aaron Connolly then, and maybe even after that Tottenham game, because he's a very young guy. He's just scored on the biggest stage, and I guess you want him to take a lot of confidence from that sort of performance, but at the same time you don't want to get too cocky about things. You don't want to think you've made it from that. What's your relationship been like with him? What have you been trying to get out of him over the last few months?
Oh, it's been really good. I've really enjoyed working with Aaron. He's got some qualities that are at a really high level. He runs behind, affects the back line, and he can score goals. And he's only young. So he's had a career where he's just scored, and he's had that knack, which is a nice knack to have. And pretty quickly in pre-season, you realise when he's playing against the likes of Shane Duffy, or he's playing against the likes of Lewis Dunk, or he's playing against the likes of Adam Webster, that he's causing them a problem. And you think, well, if he's causing them a problem, he can cause other teams a problem. At the same time, he's still learning the game, and he's still learning how to be a professional footballer at the Premier League level. And it's natural, really. You know, you score and you make your debut, and you score 2 goals, and you think maybe this is quite, it's a bit easier than what the reality of it is. And like anything, he's a young player that will go through ups and downs. He'll have bad moments, which he's had, and we've got to be there to help him and support him and to get him through those moments, and to understand what it takes to be a Premier League footballer, to be an international footballer. It's not about what you do in the first 5 matches. You've got to try to build a career that you're around for 10, 15 years, and that's the work that we've been trying to do with him. He's fundamentally a good lad. But he's got a lot to do as well. But he's got an exciting future.
Yeah, he certainly does. And as you say, there were tough times, because those 2 goals, they come on national TV. He gets thrown into the international side on a tough night with the international side, and he has to wait a long time for the next goal to come around. Yeah. Is he one of those characters that is just naturally positive and doesn't let him affect him, or is he just like the rest of us, and actually sometimes it gets on top of him, and you had to do a bit of work in terms of making sure that not the opposite of getting too cocky, but actually realise, you are 19, 20. This might take a little bit of time.
Yeah, he's a human being at the end of the day, and he hadn't scored for a while. He's going to feel that he isn't doing as well as he thinks he should, and all that talk, which can be not so helpful. You have to try again to try and help him with perspective. This is his first season. He's contributed to wins. He's contributed to team performances when he's played, even when he hasn't scored. He's played his role in for us as a team, and it's also part of his development that he has to understand as well. Is you can't expect that every game you're going to turn on the pitch, score goals, and play well in the Premier League as a forward. That would be unfair of us to put that expectation on him, and it's unfair of him to put that expectation on himself. But that's all part of the process, because he's so desperate to do well. He's so desperate to play for Brighton, to play for his country and score goals. And so you have to find the balance between perspective and his own ambition.
Similar situation, I'd imagine, then with Jason Malumbi, who went out on loan, different scenario, and played a lot of games at a young age. Just in terms of what he did last season out on loan then, Millwall, do you get much of an opportunity to see what he's doing, or are you relying on your backroom staff to feed back?
Probably a bit of both, I would say. I mean, a lot of the games, his games were televised, so we got to see those games. And the way the world is now, you can access every game pretty much. And so we've kept a close eye on Jason. He's had a really good experience at Millwall, had a good year last year. He's coming to pre-season with us now, looked really good. And again, he's got the right attitude, the right personality, desperate to be a footballer, desperate to play. And, we have to try and help him with the next steps of his career. And that's the challenge for us.
Yeah, that is a big challenge as well, I guess, when you are at that top elite level, because you look at your midfielders, Davy Proper, Dale Stevens, Yves Basuma. These are men who have been around the block, who are real quality players, who've done little or nothing wrong. And while you want to help Jason Malumbi along, there may not be a huge amount of game time there, and he may need to grab his chances. Do you see him being at Brighton this season, or is there a chance he goes back out on loan, or what's the plan?
I think we're going to take as long as we can to get to know each other more before we make that decision, because it's a big decision for him. He's keen to play, and he's keen to carry on that development that he's had. But I would also argue that at the start of the season, Aaron Connolly had Glenn Murray and Florian Andone and Jurgen Locadia, ahead of him. So, or certainly, first team footballers, and we made a pathway for him and a space for him. But at the same time, when you're playing young players, they're not consistent. They're a bit up and down, and as a coach, you have to shoulder that as well. So it's a bit of a balance always, as we spoke about earlier. But I like Jason a lot. I like his personality. I like his football attributes. And like I said, he's desperate to play football and learn and improve. And as a coach, it's nice to work with those players. At the same time, as we said before, you've got to respect their careers and respect that they want to carry on developing and moving forward.
How do you know when they're ready at that young age? How did you know Aaron Connolly was ready for that step up?
Well, I wouldn't say that I knew that he was ready. I just thought that he had some attributes that could be really helpful and useful in the Premier League. So I thought that he could run in behind defenders, and I thought that he could score. He's still got lots of things to learn, and I guess that's the challenge with Premier League and young players. It's helping them learn their trade at that level. It's not so easy because the pressure and the external noise and all that sort of stuff, and the competition itself isn't so easy. But you never know is the answer. But at the same time, what you do know is that they'll try their best. They'll give everything, and then your job is to try to help them through that process. And at the same time, make sure the team gets enough results that, back to our conversation earlier, that you can keep your 3 points, or you keep enough points that can keep you in the job. Because fundamentally, back to philosophies, if you played Aaron Connolly or you're playing Jason Malumbi, but you've lost a few games, there'll be some guy in Ireland going, "Hey, Potter needs to get the sack." Despite the fact that you're playing young players from Ireland, it's that's how it is.
Yeah. Well, here, put them in first, and we'll worry about that later on. All right, that's the main thing.
Exactly.
It is an unusual scenario, of course, that they could well be playing international football before they're back at Brighton, which is another thing to throw into the mix. Have you had many conversations with Stephen Kenny, or is that just not something that really happens?
No, I'm pretty sure we will over the next days, because those guys are going to be close to the thinking, I'm pretty sure. So we want to help them, and I think the closer you get to the relationship, the better, because we've got information for them, and we want to help them do well, because it's in everybody's interest for them to go to the countries and play well. Nobody would be happier than me, because it's a great experience for them and a huge honour. And again, back to what I said before, it'll make a difference to their lives and their careers.
One last question, because you've been very good with your time. I mentioned your playing career, and you played in the Premier League with Southampton. I think it was 8 appearances.
I think two of those were. You were quite generous with referring to me as a good player, but
no.
You're trying to butter me up there.
If you played in the Premier League, weirdly though, 2 of the games you played in were 2 of the most famous Premier League games that have ever been, which were Southampton's 6-3 win over Manchester United, where I think you came off the bench. But you started the day that Ali Dia, George Weah's imaginary cousin, who somehow managed to trick Graham Souness, started that game. You were playing for Southampton that afternoon. Have you any memories of Ali Dia and that whole situation?
Well, yeah, I've been asked this a few times, actually. I remember him coming and being somebody's relation, yeah. And the lads weren't so sure when he was in training, and he ended up playing. But, you know, sometimes when you're a player, you just focus on yourself, and I was trying to establish myself in the team, and I was just, you know, like I said, I was worried so much for myself, or trying to get myself up to the level and be a Premier League player, and I didn't take too much notice. But I certainly remember the boys weren't convinced at the time. But then probably when they were speaking about me, they weren't convinced about me either.
You were just delighted he took the attention.
Yeah, exactly. I took the pressure off myself. To be fair, I was delighted. I stayed on the pitch, and I think they brought him off.
Graham, it's been brilliant to talk to you. Thanks.
Me or him?
Yeah. Well, luckily, things have gone slightly differently for the two of you since then. You've been great with your time. I know you're in the middle of pre-season up in Scotland at the moment. And as I say, there's a huge Irish interest in what happens at Brighton this season. So we'll be keeping a very close eye. Thanks for talking to us.
Oh, no problem. Good luck.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
Looking for a football show with a bit of a twist?
So I know the likes of Griezmann's big into his fashion.
He wanted a lot. One question he actually asked me was, could he make his studs light up when he runs?
Team 33, the football magazine show for the football purists.
Yeah, the Nike Mercurials from 1998, if you just show that boot to an entire generation of people, and they just get instantly nostalgic and remember everything from that era.
The very best interviews with the cult heroes of the past, and a look at the cultural side of football. Team 33, live at 9 p.m. every Friday on OTB Sports Radio. Live 24/7 on the OTB Sports app.
Into sports.
20 yards out, Ursh to shoot, don't shoot! Oh, what a goal from Fabinho! Wow!
Then get into the all-new OTB Sports app.
I think when he apologises to me, I probably will say hello to him, yeah. No.
Videos, sports news, live scores, interviews.
If Fabregas is going to come up to me in the street and give me some of the mouth that he would have given me on a football pitch, what would he get a slap?
Plus, exclusive content on the OTB Podcast Network. The biggest names in sports. Ready when you are. Search OTB Sports on your app store and download it now.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
Yeah, it's just gone 8 o'clock on this Friday morning. Delighted to have you along with us on OTB AM. It's Adrian with you all through this morning. We're going to have Dave McIntyre on the line very shortly in a stacked show coming up for you as well over the course of the day. As do get in contact with us over the course of the morning as well. We want to hear from you. 0879 180 180 if you want to hit us up on WhatsApp with a video, voice note, a message, whatever it is you're having yourself, or indeed on any of our social channels as well. So please feel free to get in contact with us over the course of the morning. We do want to hear from you as well. And OTB AM is live in association with Gillette. Good morning start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. As I've just gone 8 o'clock, we've lots coming your way over the course of the morning. We've reaction to some of the sport last night, including the golf, the BMW. I know Dave was looking at that in detail, and we'll get his thoughts on that, I'm sure, very shortly as well. And plenty more as well, besides the football as well in Tala last night too, that ended up gathering a little bit of an audience. We'll have reflections of that in just a little bit. We'll bring you through the papers in a few minutes' time, just to let you know what's going on there. Sam Lee of The Athletic is going to join us. He's the Manchester City correspondent there, and he'll bring us all the very latest. I don't know if you'd really call them developments, but certainly some new news coming from the Lionel Messi. Is he actually going to leave Barcelona situation? And if he does, it does look like Manchester City will be the main club standing there. So we'll get Sam Lee's thoughts on that from the Manchester City side, because I know there was some good conversations with Simon Cooper in relation to the Lionel Messi part of that potential move a little earlier in the week. So we'll get Sam Lee's thoughts on that. Kavitha Davidson is going to talk us through all the very latest details as well from the NBA and the WNBA, and further afield now in the US, with lots of players, franchises, sports now out on strike in relation to the latest events in the US. So Kavitha Davidson of The Athletic will join us a bit later on to talk us through some of the wider societal impact of exactly what it is that's going on there at the minute. We're going to talk rugby with Alan Quinlan. Interesting weekend ahead again in the Inter-Pros after last weekend's action, and of course the confirmation during the week. We haven't had Quinny on since the confirmation of RG Sneeman's AC joint being gone, and it might have been out for 6 to 12 months. So we'll get Quinny's thoughts on that and the impact that it'll have on Munster as well. Does it make them potential for a Heineken Cup next season? Is it that much of a difference that he's gone from that to now suddenly, they're gone from that to now suddenly not being contenders for that competition? Is it that much of a loss? It certainly feels that way from listening to the various utterances from the club during the week. We'll have deal or no deals as well. Deal or no deal as well with Dave just before we leave you towards the end of the show. Some interesting stuff this morning in terms of potential transfers, including Diego Costa and Jose Mourinho being reunited. I mean, that's something that I think we all want to see. So we'll keep an eye out for that. That's coming your way a little bit later on. Lots to get stuck into in the newspapers as well. Some interesting stuff there, and including I'm sure you might have seen the Harry Maguire interview with Dan Rowan at the BBC that happened last night. I mean, I don't think I'm that naive, but I certainly watched it and thought that Harry Maguire's case was pretty plausible. So we'll just see exactly how that develops over the next little while. He's obviously taking it to appeal to a higher court, feels he's very confident that, as he sees it, the right outcome is going to take place. So that's the case of Harry Maguire and plenty more as well besides. So that's coming your way over the course of this morning between now and 10 a.m. this morning. Do get in contact with us on that number 0879 180 180. I don't know, were you watching Rovers last night? It wasn't televised live anywhere, but there was certainly a couple of streams, if you were in the know, a couple of streams of some journalists who were at the game in Tala and who were in a position to be able to bring us live coverage of that penalty shootout. And it was high drama. It was 12-11 in the end, if you were following it. And we went through the full cycle, given obviously the numbers that were involved there, the full cycle of teams going for the penalty spot, including both keepers who totally nailed their penalties. No bother to them whatsoever. They absolutely nailed them home. And then Alan Manis for Rovers saved a crucial spot kick from Ilves, the Finnish team, and then it was up to the former Ireland international Joey O'Brien to step up and slather home, and he did so. There was about 12 or 15 Rovers fans gathered at what I think was the square end of the Tala Stadium, and they were there to sort of light a couple of green flares and cheer their team home, and they're being generally lauded for doing that. Of course, guidance and guidelines is that they should not have been there. That's plain as day. I think at this stage we're sort of at the end of August, and it's pretty obvious that no fans were to gather for the game last night. Obviously, some people feel that it's, they can go against the grain, and it's a crucial moment in sport, and they should be there to cheer on their team. They were all gathered together as well, by the way, it should be said, in very close proximity. It's possible that they were all from the same household, of course. Highly unlikely will be my own view on that. Dave McIntyre, good morning to you.
Good morning, Adrian. How are you?
Flying, and thanks. Yeah, you were. I don't think you managed to be one of the ones that was checking out on Johnny Ward's Instagram stream last night, or David Sneyd as well. I know had her up there. I know when it dawned on me when Tommy Rooney was tweeting about her, I was like, "Oh, this is absolutely fantastic!" And the penalty shootout was sensational. I do have an issue with the fans being there, gathered together. They're being generally lauded for doing it, and aren't they great to be out supporting their team? They just shouldn't be there. The guidance is pretty clear at this stage.
Yeah, I don't think there's any. There's no two ways to argue it. You either are allowed to be there or you're not. And I don't know what the exact number was, and you would love to be in a position to say, well, aren't they great? They weren't allowed into the game, and they're such avid fans of their club. And look, don't we know what League of Ireland clubs need all the support they can get, and Rovers are one of the best supported clubs. Well, they probably are the best supported club in the country, but they shouldn't have been there. And I don't understand. I've seen journalists, well-known members of the media, lauding the fact that these guys were there, had made such an effort to go and watch Rovers, but they shouldn't have been there because they're breaking all sorts of social distancing rules. There's not an awful lot more you can say on it, but when I see those photos, I don't think fair play to you lads. I think you shouldn't be there, boys. Let's all have a little think about what we should be doing in this day and age. And there will be plenty of time, hopefully very soon, when they can be in the Tala Stadium and roaring on their team. But now is not one of them.
Yeah, exactly. And, I wouldn't actually have had an issue at all if they were sort of spread out, if there was some element or effort to social distance.
Yeah.
But there was clearly just none that were stacked in on top of each other. On the penalty shootout itself, Dave, the penalties seemed to be, either the penalties were exceptionally well taken or the keepers were muck. I'm not sure what the answer to that was. Maybe a combination of both. But it did strike me watching it, and obviously, as I mentioned, it wasn't exactly like it wasn't like a high detailed, high level production here. We were obviously depending on somebody's iPhone in the stands to sort of, grainy shots of the penalty shootout. So it was very hard to see in detail exactly like facial expressions or how nervous players were. But it did seem from looking at the penalty shootout that they were being struck with such ease that maybe the absence of 5,000 or 6,000 or 8,000 fans in the stadium actually just removed some of that pressure a little bit.
Yeah, look, it's hard to know, but you may have a point there, because we will never know the pressures of a penalty shootout in front of a crowd. I have participated in penalty shootouts before, but I can guarantee you there were no crowds watching. And I actually did feel a little bit of pressure for the penalty I hit. It was more of a Tony Cascarino Italian 90 penalty that I was just thankful it somehow managed to squeeze under the goalkeeper's body. But maybe there was that in play in that penalty shootout last night. But if you've got 20... Well, I was going to say 23 successful penalties, but obviously there was the opening penalty was missed, wasn't it? From a Rovers point of view, but there was over 20 successful penalties converted. So it's probably somewhere between the two, between consistently brilliant goalkeeping and consistently poor goalkeeping, consistently brilliant penalty taking. It is a little from column A, a little from column B, I would say. But I would imagine the pressure ramped up significantly by the time the guy who missed at 11 each, or at 12-11, had missed. I'd say he was really starting to feel the pressure, because it doesn't matter if there's no fans there. Once your turn comes around a second time, and this has been going on for that long, I'd say you are really feeling it at that stage. And I actually felt sorry for the lad that missed, because it's one thing missing in a 5-4 or a sudden death, but to miss when it's 12-11 and it'll be a penalty shootout that will go down in the memory for many, many years, and particularly from Shamrock Rovers fans' point of view, I had some sympathy for that guy. I mean, it's an extraordinary penalty shootout, and Twitter was ablaze last night. Yeah.
It was great. It was. It's the reason that we're all so delighted that sport is back. That even though I don't think either of us are that vested in Shamrock Rovers, but just the pure sheer drama of it was absolutely.
And as well,
fantastic.
it brings to an end a pretty forgettable week for the Irish clubs in Europe, and it's nice to be able to end that week on a high, because we've seen in the last 8 days, we've seen Dundalk go out, we've seen Derry go out, we saw Bows go out in heartbreaking fashion last night. So at least one of our clubs has got through at least one round.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we'll keep an eye on that as that advances, and we've plenty more to come as well. We've had Isle Cody, who's been. I was being romantic earlier on, Dave, with the suggestion of the Diego Costa and Jose Mourinho potentially being reunited. She's much less romantic, Isle Cody, saying that it's not what we all want to see. We've a petulant child on the sideline, so we'd also don't need one on the field. It's tough enough being a Spurs fan.
If I was a Spurs fan going to bed last night at the prospect of getting Matt Doherty for a fraction really of what he should be going for, I would have slept soundly last night. If I was a Spurs fan waking up this morning to the news that Diego Costa, who turns 32 in 2 months and is perennially injured and constantly falling out with managers anywhere he goes, and some of his teammates, that he was on the verge of joining the club, my coffee would have tasted rather sour this morning, I would think. He is the last guy Tottenham need to be joining. Also, I mean, what does it say for Harry Kane? Does Harry Kane want to be playing at the same club as Diego Costa? Does Diego Costa want to go to the same club as Harry Kane, where he's quite obviously going to be playing second fiddle? Because I don't see Jose Mourinho playing two out-and-out centre forwards in the Premier League next season. I hope it does happen from a journalistic point of view, because like Jose, Diego Costa's presence in the league that we spend most of our time watching can only add content, and that's not something I'm going to turn my nose up at. But if I was a Tottenham supporter, I would be reading this story and hoping that it's just transfer fluff and there's no real substance to it.
All of those reasons, Dave, of me going, get him in there, get him in straight away. This is something we not only desire, it's something we need in our lives. Diego Costa and Jose Mourinho back. We'll see. There's some reports of it this morning. Developments from the US overnight as well, just to bring you up to speed with before we bring you our conversation with Kavitha Davidson. Everybody will be very much aware that at this stage of play being stopped in the US in relation to the NBA's market protest following the shooting of Jacob Blake, and we now believe that Play will resume. Reports that the LA Clippers and the LA Lakers would refuse to play, but it does look as if we are going to see some action now. It seems that once the initial emotions cooled, that they have reached an agreement. We're waiting to see if the league franchises will be introducing additional measures to highlight the Black Lives Matter movement. I know certainly in the Premier League, and we'll bring you the details in the papers in just a little bit, that they are planning to continue the taking a knee protest before games, including at the Community Shield this weekend as well. So that's from a little closer to home. But it seems that LeBron James in particular has changed his stance to support now a restart. Michael Jordan, the Charlotte Hornets owner, obviously is reported to have become the link man now, it seems, between the players and owners, to have played a big role in paving the way for a restart. So they're the latest events. We did speak to Kavitha a little bit before, back during one of the players' meetings last evening, and we will watch that story as it develops over the weekend. But to put it all in a bit of a broader societal context, here's Kavitha Davidson from The Athletic. All right, I'm delighted to say that Kavitha Davidson of The Athletic, the lead podcast on The Athletic, joins us on the line. And good morning to you, Kavitha. Obviously, a lot to get into with this developing story in the US, and an increasing wave of frustration in the US, of anger, exasperation as well, and so many, I guess, terms that we could put it on. It probably boils down to, I guess, an increasing lack of acceptance of racism globally now. And the latest action has been set off by the shooting by Wisconsin police of Jacob Blake, who's a 29-year-old black father of 6, shot 7 times by Wisconsin police. And the lack of acceptance of that, I guess, by a number of players and teams in the NBA has kicked it off. I did wonder, just to talk in some of the societal impact of it, Kavitha, to begin with, maybe in terms of the coverage and reaction, just to get a sense from you of what news coverage it's getting. Is it front page? Because I know there obviously are major events happening in the US at the minute. There's the political conversations, there's Storm Laura coming in, there's a pandemic. So I wondered in all that context exactly where this sits in the American psyche at the minute.
Yeah, I mean, I do a lot of television when sports kind of crosses over into the sports news, the mainstream news aspect. And this is all over the news channels in the United States. I'll put it this way. The front page of the New York Times this morning was a full color spread of an empty NBA court inside the bubble after the Bucks walked off, after the Milwaukee Bucks walked off, with just the word boycott across from it. So this is definitely getting widespread coverage beyond just the American sports world.
And has it been viewed by the American public as a watershed moment, Kavitha? Because we've had 2020 seems to have been such a mad year in so many ways, and such an interesting year in so many ways. Is it being viewed, this latest action, as a watershed moment, or how do you? What's your sense of how the American public are viewing this?
I think definitely. I think, you know, one of the major impactful, we've had so many of these moments in 2020, as you mentioned, right? And I can think of 3 at least where I will always remember where I was when I heard news came down, and what it was like, frankly, as a sports writer, to work through the night putting together the coverage for that. And they were when Kobe Bryant died in January, when Rudy Gobert of the Utah Jazz tested positive and shut down all of sports in America, essentially, back in March. And last night, August 26th, when the Milwaukee Bucks walked off the court and spurred this domino effect of teams throughout the NBA, teams throughout American sports, refusing to take the field or take the court in the name of racial justice. Now, I think one of the questions has been, this whole entire summer, since the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis, another black man at the hands of police, there's been a wave of protests and calls for racial justice, and NBA players who have always been activists, WNBA players as well, who have always been activists in this space, really using their voice about this. And the concern was, once play resumed, once the NBA started, once sports came back, would we be able to pay the same amount of attention on these issues as we did when we were in a shutdown? And honestly, the sad reality of it is that it happened again. Another unarmed black man was shot by police, and that's what's bringing this back to the forefront. But this very much does feel like a watershed moment. I can't tell you the last time in my lifetime that that an entire league or an entire players union decided to stop playing, decided to essentially go on strike for a racial justice cause. We've seen this happen for economic reasons and for labor, negotiations and things like that. But I have not seen this in my lifetime ever. So it does very much feel like a watershed moment.
Yeah, and it also seems to have caught everybody. I mean, including the various franchises by surprise, and in some regards, obviously, a lot of players by surprise. It feels like at the core of this was enough is enough.
Very much so. Enough is enough. Also, what can we do? We have been marching. George Floyd was killed in May. He was killed on Memorial Day in America. And we have been marching and protesting, and we have been calling for police reform on a legislative level for months now. And it happened again. And I think that players kind of, they've realized how much of a voice they have. They realize how much they can impact the financials of these games. And they realize that they are the product. Without these players, we don't have anything. But I think that they're also saying, listen, we came back, we put our lives at risk to, enter this grand experiment that is the NBA bubble in the middle of a pandemic to entertain the rest of you. So, they're asking for us as fans and as viewers to give them something back. And as politicians, they're asking their local legislatures to protect them because, yes, they're famous basketball players and they're millionaire athletes, but they're also still Black men in America.
And every step, obviously, and this has been watched very closely, and it's so interesting to see exactly how it all plays out. A lot of people would have seen Kenny Smith walk off broadcast last night, and everybody is sort of on the hoof trying to figure out exactly what the right thing to do here is, because even the reaction in the studio afterwards was like, well, we're very supportive of that. And at the same time, I mean, in the context of that and in the context of the games, it's hard to know what the right thing to do is, because they have the ear of the American public now, and it's difficult, I guess, for them to know even what the right next steps are.
Well, that's what they are. They are literally meeting as we speak. It is very unclear what the right next steps are. I think that NBA players in particular are trying to present a united front. If you remember back before the bubble reopened, there wasn't actually 100% unity among the players about whether to even return to sports, whether to even go into the bubble. There was a small faction of players led by Kyrie Irving of the Brooklyn Nets that felt that it was, one, unsafe, but mostly that it would distract from the strides and the messaging towards Black Lives Matter and towards racial justice. So Kyrie and some of the players in his camp actually called for a boycott of the bubble. And the other side of it won out, which again, I don't think that there's any right or wrong answer here. Civil rights movements always have competing factions on the methods and how to go about this. But, the side that kind of won out, the majority of the players said, we want to play. There's obviously a lot of money at stake, but we can have an even bigger platform if we go inside the bubble, if we go to the playoffs, we have nationally televised games, and we use those cameras to talk about Black Lives Mattering, to talk about Breonna Taylor and say her name, and to talk about the things that we actually want to see change in this country. And now what we're seeing, now that they've actually started the playoffs and they have that in even bigger platform, is that they can use that platform, they can leverage it for even more change because they haven't seen it in the last several months.
Interestingly, it's like it does feel that like for every, because we've mentioned, and you've mentioned some of the steps that have been taken over the last number of months, for every step forward in relation to conversations and understanding, I suppose, around areas of diversity and inclusiveness and ultimately killing racism, I guess is what it boils down to. It almost feels as if at times it gets an equal and sometimes maybe more forceful shunt almost in the opposite direction in the voice maybe and the actions of deep racism, whether it's in the US or elsewhere. And given Donald Trump's, interestingly, one area that he's very weak on, obviously, is when it comes to shouting down racism and racist actions. How difficult is it to make forward steps in that conversation then around racism when you've got that counterbalance, and as I said, at times, and maybe more than the counterbalance coming from the very top?
I mean, it's incredibly difficult. As you mentioned, especially when it comes from the very top, but as difficult and as much of a roadblock to racial progress as Donald Trump might be or the current administration might be, these are things that Black Americans have been marching for 100 years, that these are wrongs that have existed in this country for 300-400 years at this point. So none of this is new, right? And it's extremely difficult to achieve progress. Social media and players realizing their power and having a platform to use that power is starting to change that. Broadly, there need to be more tangible things that actually reform in order to bring change, right? And this is kind of the worry whenever a movement like this happens, is that we're going to march for a couple of weeks and everyone's going to forget about it. And that was the worry when George Floyd was killed in May. But again, it just keeps happening. And I think this time around, what you've been seeing since May is you've been seeing players not only use their voice, but use their feet and use their money and actually put them toward tangible change. LeBron James, for example, has started voter registration drives, and he and some other players have started a campaign in Florida to combat voter disenfranchisement, especially of convicted felons who are being denied their vote. The Milwaukee Bucks, when they walked out, this is actually really stunning to me. When they walked out of the court before Game 5 against the Orlando Magic, they stayed sequestered in their locker room for more than 3 hours, basically the entirety and more of what would have been that game, until they got on the phone with the Wisconsin Attorney General. And they actually had a conversation with the Wisconsin Attorney General, who basically, they spoke very briefly, but, basically said that they wanted to know what kinds of tangible things they could force, that they could ask for. And those things, and then they came out and they gave their statement. It was a very powerful statement, and it was very well thought out. They had several hours to write it. But one of the things that they pointed to was, because the state legislature is on recess right now, they said, come back to Congress, come back to the legislature, and actually pass this police reform bill that was introduced by the lieutenant governor in June. So I see a lot of people on social media saying that these players don't really know what they're fighting for, and they're just kind of whining, and they're not really asking for anything tangible. That could not be further from the truth.
Mm. And the in relation to the at the very top of the calls you say with the Attorney General are very interesting. Like, what is the expectation of where those conversations go? Like, what is the, I guess, tangible outcome that's expected?
I mean, I think that we'd be naive to overstate the role that athletes can play in actually getting legislation passed, but that is why this league-wide boycott, or strike is the appropriate word. That is why, when we got news that the Lakers and the Clippers had voted in an impromptu player meeting to potentially sit out the rest of the playoffs, that is where they figure they can actually enact change, because the conditions of them coming back to play, and we won't know that until this meeting that is currently going on while you and I are talking ends. But what LeBron said, and what some of these other players have said that they need, is they now need their owners to put their money where their mouth is. These owners are very adept at getting hundreds of millions of dollars from the state in tax funding and tax subsidies for new arenas and new stadiums. These are billionaires that absolutely wield not just money, but political influence in their local municipalities. So now they are saying to owners, if you want us to continue the playoffs, actually put your money where your mouth is and force our local politicians to do something about this.
Yeah, and that's where it becomes a very interesting conversation, and it'll be a point where it becomes very interesting to watch exactly what sports reaction to this, because I know that baseball have had their say in the last little while. PGA Tour have come out in with a statement, at least anyway, up to this point, to say that they're in support of any players who feel they should take similar action. You mentioned LeBron, Kavitha. He's obviously such an interesting guy to talk about, and he's such a strong voice around this, and maybe one of the more driving forces behind all this. A lot of people are talking about it in the context of Michael Jordan. People will have seen The Last Dance, and that brought that narrative back into conversation very recently. And I suppose his apolitical stance, maybe to put it that way, this has the possibility of, obviously, LeBron doing things on the court fine, but this is the possibility of really elevating him as a person way beyond what he's achieved on the court.
Well, look, I think that LeBron's been doing this. He's been doing this work for several years now. This isn't just, LeBron taking advantage of a movement where it's easy to make social activism part of your brand in 2020, right? Because everyone's kind of doing it. LeBron has been very much at the forefront of a lot of these movements. But you're right. It is a huge departure from what we've seen of athletes of the 90s, not just Michael Jordan, but Tiger Woods, for example, where it was detrimental to their earning potential to wade into political issues. On the other hand, it is really stunning to me that a player like LeBron, who right now he's a Hall of Famer, he's made all the money in the world, he's now dealing with legacy, right? He wants to win a championship with the Lakers to be able to just put that conversation about him versus Michael Jordan to bed. And he is saying that I will give up that chance to even cement that legacy to walk off the court for racial justice, because I am a Black man in America and my kids are Black in America, and what happens to the next generation matters more than how the next generation sees me as compared to Michael Jordan. Similarly with the Bucks, I mean, the fact that it was the Bucks, I know that, you know, they're from Milwaukee, they're just a few miles away from where Jacob Blake was shot, but they also had the best record in the NBA, right? They are very much title contenders right now. So these are not teams and players that have nothing to lose by going about this. And LeBron has frankly always put his money where his mouth is now. And now we're seeing that extend throughout the league. And we have been for several months.
Do we know yet the official responses from, you mentioned the Attorney General earlier on, and like the police force are obviously very central to this conversation as well, and right up to the White House. What's the reaction been to this? Because it's going to be fascinating to watch that over the next while, given the popularity of the game and the players amongst the American public.
I'll be perfectly honest, as of our conversation right now, I have not seen any response from the White House. I expect that to change. It's not lost on me that August 26th, the date that the Milwaukee Bucks walked off the court and spurred this, you know, kind of sports-wide walkout, was the 4-year anniversary to the day of Colin Kaepernick taking the knee for the first time in a preseason game against the Packers. There's some poetic symbolism there, but obviously the president has weighed in on that. He's weighed in on Black Lives Matter. He's weighed in on these NBA players and WNBA players as well. But what they've said, I believe it was a conservative commentator named Laura Ingraham who told LeBron basically to shut up and dribble. They've made that their rallying cry. We will not shut up and dribble. We'll show up in all kinds of advertisements. So, you know, the response that I expect, it's going to be a lot of blustering. It's going to be a lot of denying that they can actually make an impact. Frankly, one of the narratives that's been emerging recently in this country, at least, is that, you know, the NBA has had struggling regular season ratings for 5 to 7 years at this point. And this year is no different, and they're actually worse. Now, I would argue that the dynamics of playing in a bubble in a global pandemic, when people are cutting the cord and all kinds of things, might contribute to that. But the narrative that a certain side of the political faction is trying to push right now is that people have stopped watching the NBA because they are too connected to Black Lives Matter. Now, I think that that's a very strategic narrative if you're trying to further a certain agenda. I would argue also that the people who would turn off the television because of Black Lives Matter messaging probably weren't watching the NBA to begin with. But I expect the response to be somewhere along those lines, that the NBA is failing compared to the NFL, which is seen as this very patriotic league in comparison, and a lot of coded messaging, frankly, about a league that is 80% Black.
Yeah, what do you expect on that? I know we obviously have a bit of we're chatting now on a Thursday evening Irish time, and this will be broadcast on Friday morning, and there may be developments between now and then. But in terms of the other sports, in terms of the NFL and that, what do you expect an impact there?
It's the morning right now in New York. We've already seen 3 MLB teams, or 3 MLB games were postponed last night. We've already seen Naomi Osaka pulled out of a tennis tournament. We've seen a couple of practices, actually. NFL practices have been suspended in solidarity. We've seen this in college football as well. The only place we didn't see anything, and maybe we'll see it tonight, is in the NHL, really. MLS, WNBA, as we said before, this is really sports-wide. But I'm also extremely curious about how the U.S. Open is going to handle this. And I know that like lower viewership and completely not the same audiences and everything like that. But the US Open is set to start on Monday, and this is a global sport. It's a very white sport, frankly. I'm curious to see, but it's also a sport that is dominated by Serena Williams on the American side, right? So I'm very curious to see what happens there. And with the NFL, you know, they've also made a lot of strides recently in how they've accepted the Black Lives messaging of their players. A lot would say it's too little too late, frankly. And a lot of people would also say that that's something that maybe Roger Goodell has reformed to, but the jury is still out on the owners, who are still billionaires and still mostly conservative. And we're just unsure about how much solidarity exists within the ownership ranks toward these players that are speaking out about Black Lives Matter. But it's going to be extremely interesting to see. And I kind of wish that we had had a preseason and an NFL preseason going on, because I'm sure that many players, if not teams throughout the league, would have walked out in solidarity with their brothers in the NBA last night.
Yeah, the solidarity from the owners, I think, spoke for itself over the last couple of years with Colin Kaepernick, as you mentioned. It'll be fascinating to watch, and we will do that over the next while. Kavitha, you do have your own book coming out. I think, is it next week? Loving Sports When They Don't Love You Back, Dilemmas of the Modern Day Fan, out on Tuesday. Give us a sense of what we can expect.
Yeah, if you're not too tired of me preaching at you about how politics and sports can intersect and kind of always do. This is a book that I've co-written with Jessica Luther, who is a very, very well-known, very accomplished freelance journalist in the States. And it's just basically about the ethical dilemmas of being a fan, how we maintain our fandoms despite, you know, our owners not supporting Black Lives Matter or things that we agree with, how we root for these teams that have players on them who've been accused of doing things that we don't agree with, how we even watch a game at a stadium that our taxpayer dollars paid for when we're cutting school budgets and things like that, right? But we still do it. And it's okay that we do, because we're sports fans for a reason. And we just kind of wanted to explore all of those methodologies, all of those reasons, and maybe some tips or some coping mechanisms for how we can still feel good about ourselves, but still love these games that we truly do love. So that comes out on Tuesday, and Jessica and I are very excited.
Yeah, well, we will definitely have you back on at some point over the next few weeks, if that's okay, to get into more detail on that. It sounds like a conversation we need to be having, particularly given the times we're living in. But for shedding some light on the unfolding events in the US, Kavitha Davidson of The Athletic, thanks a million for taking our call.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Yes, indeed, and it's 8:36 on this Friday morning. Delighted to have you along with us on OTB AM. It's myself and Dave with you right through until 10 this morning, and plenty more to come. We'll be talking rugby with Alan Quinlan a little bit later on, and we'll have Deal or No Deal in the company of Mr. McIntyre coming your way a little bit later in the show. But right now it is time to talk football. I'm delighted to say we're joined on the line by the Manchester City writer for The Athletic, Sam Lee. Good morning to you, Sam.
Good morning.
Interesting times to be a football writer at Manchester City at the minute.
Yeah, I'm wondering how good a quality that my camera is. You could probably see a few wrinkles appearing around the eyes. not too much sleep and a lot of stress last few days, but all fun and games.
Yeah, the prospect of having Lionel Messi on our doorstep in a time zone that suits, in a game that we all watch with great regularity has got everybody very excited. So, some slight developments this morning in that it seems like the Barcelona president has decided that he would be willing to fall on his sword if it meant that Lionel Messi would stay in. So we have to wait and see whether this is just some sort of a ploy by him to double bluff Messi, or in fact it's real. But if he is to go anywhere for a raft of different reasons, it seems like Manchester City is the most natural fit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's probably a good way of cutting through everything. There's all sorts of different things that could go into it, and why he could or couldn't actually leave. But yeah, if he does manage it, then City are ready and waiting. Basically, they've wanted to get in a position to be ready to take him for, I don't know, more than 10 years now. Obviously, since the owners came in, I think the owners have always wanted Messi. They've always wanted Guardiola. They've always wanted Messi. It looked like, they got one of those. It looked like they got one of those. they last came close to getting Messi, I think, 4 years ago in 2016. It was pretty close, but I wouldn't say it's as close as it is now. And I remember back in February, there was more talk of Messi being unhappy. And I was kind of thinking, my own opinion, I was like, surely City wouldn't go for him now, 33 years old, surely financially not viable. But then managed to do a bit of digging around and found out that City was still then in February willing to get him this summer if he did want to leave. And this is the situation we're in now. They've always, because of their attempts to get him over the years, they've always been in good contact with his dad in particular, the people around him. They've got a good idea of what he needs. Financially, obviously, that's taken a bit of negotiation, I suppose, a bit of discussion in the last couple of weeks. But I mean, in terms of the sporting project that he always talks about, to be honest, quite often he speaks about leaving Barcelona, doesn't he? Because the sporting project isn't right. They've not got a team to win the Champions League. And look, you could be watching this and think, well, City haven't got a team to win the Champions League either, evidently. But I think Messi does see himself in that team with Guardiola and see that as, I don't know, a good bet for the last couple of years of his career if he does leave.
Yeah. Financially, just that you mentioned it, how does that all fit in? Because City are a club that walk that financial fair play line pretty finely, and there's some chat this morning about players like Gabriel Jesus and Bernardo Silva and some others that may make way here to make it fit. Is that just a very simple case that they offload a bunch of players to make way for him and make it work that way under FFP?
Yeah, it could well be. I mean, I appreciate this is getting less and less of an acceptable thing to say, but earlier in the week when it was Tuesday, Wednesday, and this was all kicking off, I was able to say, look, I don't know how they're going to do it, but I know they're going to do it. If they get the opportunity, they will do it. Unfortunately, now it's like, okay, we need to actually know how they are going to do it. And yeah, those player sales, swap deals with Barcelona, I don't know, maybe they try and sell a player elsewhere. That will probably come into it. I mean, I'd been told a few weeks ago anyway, it was just before the FA Cup semi-final, so whenever that was, start of July, the City could spend up to 300 million this summer. I think that would always be offset by people going out, but that could be the headline outgoing figure. And now, obviously, with the Messi situation developing, it seems like those kind of figures fit. So I don't know if that's true, what I've heard, and I have no reason to disbelieve it, then there may well be more space in the budget there than is generally imagined now. The other side of it is, the player sales. But the other side of that is FFP's obviously been relaxed in a way that it doesn't allow clubs to do whatever they want. But basically the reporting period has been extended. So this summer and next summer, effectively the same. So there wouldn't be so much of a rush, I don't think. It would be a gamble on City's part. But I suppose, because obviously they're desperate to get Messi, and they always have been, and this is their chance, so they will do it. I suppose what they could do is commit the money, but then they would need to find a buyer for argument's sake, Gabriel Jesus or Bernardo Silva in the next 12 months and sell them next summer, because they do have that extra long reporting period to balance those books. I'm not sure how much they'll have to get off the books. Wages wise, there's a lot of talk of all of City's sponsors would be willing to pay more. Again, that's a normal part of football if you sign a superstar like that. But again, with it being Manchester City, I'm sure a lot of people will roll their eyes, or worse. It's a bit like the Juventus situation when they signed Ronaldo, and the Fiat workers went on strike because the holding company put money in to get Ronaldo. These kind of things are normal. There will be ways to get those wages done. In terms of getting a fee with Barcelona, again, the big question is how much would Barcelona want?
Sam, how far are Manchester City willing to push this before they actually get categorical confirmation that Messi is free to make the move? Because this could end up in court. It's all coming down to whether the contract, which stipulates that he was supposed to let Barca know by the 10th of June whether or not he wanted to stay for another year, holds up or not due to the pandemic and the elongated nature of the season. And there's a real Barca connection at the club with Pep and with Begiristain. I mean, are they willing to engage in these talks with Messi and his representatives, get the deal over the line, the terms and the conditions sorted, and then hope that they are eventually free and in a position to sign him?
Well, I think that's already happened. I think they have, I'm pretty certain they have had those conversations in the last couple of weeks. There's been meetings, like internal meetings at City, where they've kind of worked out the financial viability of it. They've worked out what they can and can't do. They've decided they are in a position to pursue this. And like I say, It was fine for me to say on Tuesday night when it was breaking that this is City's position. Obviously, now we need to see exactly how far they're going to go. But they are in that position. They are ready to do that. But yeah, you're right. Is he going to be able to leave on a free? Seems unlikely now. The consensus among Spanish lawyers seems to be that he's been badly advised to send that burofax and think that he can leave on a free. But I do believe there's an element at City where they are willing to pay a reasonable amount, but then it comes down to what is that reasonable amount. And I know I've given a lot of long rambling answers, but there's also a school of thought in Barcelona that to me I would say, well, Bartomeu surely won't want to be the president that oversees Messi leaving. He won't want to take the blame for that. But there's definitely a school of thought in Barcelona, and it's not based on nothing, that if Bartomeu wants to consolidate his position, he effectively can't afford to leave and let somebody else come in and maybe look back over the last few years worth of, outgoings and incomings and all of that, and that he actually wants and needs Messi off the books to keep them going and make them more financially viable because of the situation they're in. So if they say, well, okay, we can get his wages off the books and we can get 150, 200 million euros, it sounds quite unlikely, but this is one of the schools of thought going around people who are close to the situation in Spain, closer than I am to the Barcelona end of things. But yeah, if you're asking about the point to which City will push it, if Barca say, well, we want the clause, or if Barca say we want 400 million, even City with all their desire and all their resources, I think they would have to say, look, we can't do that. But they are obviously confident to have got to this point. Messi's given them the encouragement that they need to pursue it. But yeah, to answer your question that you asked about 10 minutes ago now, sorry, it comes down to how much Barca are actually determined to get him out. And if Bartomeu does want to get him out, basically he's just trying to string them along. If he can get 200 million, I'm sure City would find a way to get as close to that as possible. If it's the clause, it's never going to happen. If they say it's 500 million, it's never going to happen. But City will take it as far as they can because they're not close to getting it, but they're not as close to getting Messi, but they're as close as they ever have been, basically.
Can we picture a hypothetical situation whereby Messi has signed, Sergio Aguero was fully fit and in perfect condition, having had all this time to get himself ready, and that Gabriel Jesus, in his mind, sees himself as the de facto number one when it comes to the centre forward at the club, and they're all there ready to go on the opening weekend of the new Premier League season. How do you see that dynamic working? Because Jesus has been very public in it, discussing how he's changed his game under Pep. He knew he had to work harder. He has to lead the defence. He has to lead the press. And then suddenly, both he and Aguero, obviously, are going to be utterly sidelined by this hype show that will arrive in the guise of a 33-year-old Leo Messi. And I'm just wondering, will the whole dynamic of this Manchester City squad that is based on hard work and individual player development, that'll just be thrown completely out of kilter?
I mean, I suppose it's possible that it would be thrown out of kilter. I mean, a lot of people have been asking, what about, and not even those players, but what about Mahrez, what about Bernardo Silva, what about Foden? And I do think any player would want to play with Messi. And I do think that, look, if he affects the element of hard work, the pressing, I mean, City had a problem with their pressing last season. In my opinion, that was a big reason why they didn't achieve their goals, and that was a reason why they conceded so many counter-attacks. But at the same time, there was a lot of games where they could have papered over those cracks. And I'm not saying this would make them a more stable team, but they might be better at papering over those cracks if they've got somebody in Messi who's going to score 50 goals a season, rather than Sterling and Jesus, who have done very well, but as we probably saw boiled down into one game in that Lyon game, if they'd have put those chances away, all the questions about City's tactics would have been forgotten about. And if they've got Messi, and because it's such a dream of the owners and the club are willing to make it happen, it might not make them a more stable team in terms of that pressing, in terms of everybody singing on the same hymn sheet. But I think on the balance of probabilities, if you put it all together, you've got all the negatives here and you've got Messi here. I just think it's always worth having Messi. And I do think everything he would bring, unless he was a disaster, unless he didn't settle, unless he got an injury or something, it would be worth doing. And it's probably not the best, most sensible business decision City have ever made. It's probably a bit of a calculated risk. But if you're going to bet on anybody, it would be Messi. In terms of the balance of the squad, and you mentioned Gabriel Jesus, if they do sell a player to balance the books, obviously there's been reports about Jesus and Bernardo Silva. Jesus seems to be the one that makes more sense to me, because it's been 18 months now that I've been hearing that there have been times where they've considered selling him anyway. to upgrade him because they think he's a very good striker, but they need somebody who's a bit more clinical. And I don't think anything he did last season will have changed their minds. And obviously, if you've got an opportunity to get a good fee for him and upgrade, and the upgrade is Lionel Messi, then all that comes together. So it might not be the case that Jesus is in the team at the same time as Messi, or it might not be the case that he's there for longer than a year. If other players are going to be upset by Messi being there, look, some of them might miss out on game time, but City were planning to bring in a new forward anyway. The fact that it's Messi kind of suggests that it's really going to put noses out of joint. If they'd assigned somebody of a lesser profile, Lautaro Martinez, for example, João Felix, those guys probably would have been thinking, well, why aren't I playing? I know this guy's good, but why aren't I playing? But there might be an element to it of, well, it is Messi, and it's an honour. I know it sounds a bit fanboyish, but it would genuinely be an honour, surely, for any player to play with Messi for at least one season. And then next year they can go and take stock. Bernardo Silva can say, did I play enough? Am I happy? Is it worth it playing with Messi? If they want to go, then they can go. But I don't think it's going to be an issue, certainly for that first season, if it were to happen. I just think that the positives outweigh the negative 10 times over.
And he's been at Barcelona for the last 12 or 13 years, but there have been some bloody sizable egos there too over the last while, and he's managed to see most of them off. This might be a totally stupid point to make, Simon. Please feel free to shout it down if that be the case in your view. But if is there a possibility this ends up being a bad deal for Manchester City? Like, his influence and his character are pretty all-encompassing. We've been listening to it over the last week or so since all this sort of cropped up. Like, he's very intense, dominating. I mean, I don't want to say domineering, but it doesn't seem to be that far off it from everything you hear. That's worked at Barcelona because he was the mainstay, he was the top dog at the club, he was at the peak of his powers, maybe more importantly than all of that. And suddenly a lot of those things are not the case any longer.
Yeah, he is incredibly powerful. I think people would probably be surprised by the influence he's got at Barcelona and with Argentina as well. He is the main man. How that will translate at City, I'm not sure. I mean, maybe he would be the main man, and maybe, look, all the players, they're not just signing, it's not like City are just signing anyone for 120 million, which is like the going rate now. If Messi were to walk into the dressing room, I'm sure he would be given concessions. And look, there's not a lot of, not leadership, but there's not a lot of vocal leadership anyway, and he could be that focal point that they need. I mean, in terms of it being a bad deal, I'm going to say no straight off the bat, but I do know what you mean. I do certainly know what you mean. I do think there are potential downsides for sure. Like I say, it's probably not the most sensible, safe business decision City have ever made. They normally buy players 20 to 25 years old, as the chairman said the other day. Resale value, I guess. They normally get them for about £60 million, normally for a buyout clause. It's all very safe, and as much as you can guarantee a player settling in, they try to do that. With Messi, it is more of a risk, obviously, because maybe he'll upset the apple cart. Maybe, him being the heartbeat of the team would upset De Bruyne, who is the heartbeat of the team. How would they work together, as you've already asked before? How would it work with Aguero or Jesus being sidelined, or Bernardo Silva, or Phil Foden's progress? Where would he play? Would the pressing be as good? Look, there are loads of different reasons to think maybe it doesn't work. Financially, look, I'm sure City wouldn't jeopardise the financial health of the club going forward, but you could certainly speculate financially, is it a good decision for City? And look, I've just reeled off about 10 reasons there why you think it might not be the best idea. But like I said before, I just think it's worth it. And I think that, look, everything is very analysed now in football. And the way, we're very granular about football analysis in England and in Ireland as well when it comes to the Premier League clubs, and the way certainly the conversation is around City, this will be analysed every time he kicks a ball. And look, if he does sign and they win the Champions League next year, you're not going to have people celebrating for Man City this great. Oh, it's great. Messi's the best player ever playing in England, and an English team have won the Champions League. It's going to be Guardiola can't do it without Messi. Man City needed Messi to do it. Look at all this money they've spent with it. But look, at the end of the day, it's football. We should enjoy it. Nobody really talks about Fiat and Ronaldo and Juve anymore. It's just Ronaldo's at Juve. That's life. His personality is what it is. He's fit in there. And I just think it would be better to live in a world where Messi plays for, well, look, if it's Man City or not, you could say it's Man United or Liverpool or whoever. But it would be better to be in a world, I think, where this happens, and we get to see how it works out. And I'm sure Manchester City are thinking that. Let's see how it goes. We're buying the best player in the world. There might be some downsides, but it's Lionel Messi. They're not chucking it all out the window for the next big thing, because the next big thing might not work out. With Messi, it's about as safe a bet as you can get in terms of the quality of that one player. So I do certainly know what you mean, but I'd say it's worth it, and I would love to see it.
You mentioned Pep there, Sam. There's a bit of pressure on him already in that, despite all the money they've spent, and no manager gets more backing really, bar one or two across Europe, they've still finished 18 points off the top of the Premier League standings, and they've gone out in pretty limp style in the Champions League as well against a side that should be beating 10 times out of 10. Does it heat the pressure on him further that he has now got this player that he has won all of his Champions League titles with as a manager, and that if it doesn't happen with Messi, then really question marks hang over Pep to the point where you would start to wonder whether he has a long-term future at the club at all?
Yeah, but at the same time, in terms of question marks about his long-term future at the club, unless they were a disaster this season, I don't think he'd be sacked anyway. I don't even think they would be willing to let him leave. Maybe he wouldn't agree a new contract. I'm sure the owners would give him a new one. But it's funny you say, if he doesn't win it with Messi, you start to think, start to think this, start to think that. But even if he does win it with Messi, people he's not going to get that global credit anyway. People always say he's only won it at Barca because of that. So he's in that sense, he's in a no-win situation. Yeah. And that goes back to the nub of the question, really. Does it pile more pressure on him? I guess it does. All us guys on the outside will be saying, to be fair, look, I'm not normally one of these guys to pile expectations on a team that I'm covering or not covering. But I was saying already before the real possibility of signing Messi came about, if City sign 4 or 5 players for 200 million or more, I would be expecting them to get another 100 points next season and do much better in the Champions League. And now with Messi, if they were to get Messi, then that pressure would unquestionably be there. Regardless of how good Liverpool were last season, you would be expecting City to do the lot with Messi and Guardiola. And in that sense, there will be pressure. But I'm sure from Guardiola's point of view, obviously he does feel that pressure going into games. He does, feel that fear to not lose control of the game. But I'm sure for him, it's a fantastic opportunity. And I genuinely, again, this may sound like I'm painting it in a different light, but, if somebody offered you the Man City job, if somebody offered me it, I wouldn't be qualified to do it. But it's like, you're going to have Messi. You think, well, okay, there's a lot of pressure on me, but fuck it, I'll give it a go. And Guardiola is obviously very, very qualified to do it. And there might be pressure on the outside, but he's thinking, well, I needed a team. Well, you could say he's already got a team, and I would say he has got a team that he should get more out of, to be fair, in terms of last season's results. But if he's thinking, I need a team that I can get a tune out of, I need to keep the team fresh and go again for another 2 or 3 years, there's no better way of doing that than Messi. So there'd be pressure on the outside, but I'm sure he'd be, I suppose more pertinently, he'd be feeling rejuvenated. And a lot of City fans still want him to sign a new contract. A lot of City employees, the top employees, want him to sign a new contract. And the only way they were going to do that was to bring in players and show him that there's a long-term project for him to stay for more than 5 years. And the best way to do that is Messi. So I'm sure he'll be thinking, yeah, I've got a team. They're ready to go. Everybody's rejuvenated by Messi coming in. They might get Koulibaly as well. I don't know. They've got another couple of signings already. And yeah, I don't think he'll be feeling about the pressure. I think he'll be thinking about, how can I get Messi in this team, and how can I get Man City back to the top? And I think that's a challenge that will relish, rather than worry too much about the pressure. Although maybe if it comes to a Champions League quarter-final, he might be thinking, I really need to do this. But no, I think he'll relish it.
Yeah, I do think that point about everybody being reinvigorated by the arrival of Messi, including Guardiola, who the owners say this week that they expect everything to work out naturally as we wrap. Sam, is that your expectation that you've touched on it there, but that he re-signs now? He's got a year to run. He re-signs and is in it now for the long haul, Messi or not?
Well, Messi or not, no, I'm not sure. I don't know how they're going to handle it, because obviously you probably remember when Pellegrini's last season, there was all the rumours about Pep, and Pellegrini signed that new contract at the start of the season. But look, I think everybody knows now that there was never any intention to see that through. It was just done to stop the speculation. And I do kind of wonder if they would get to the same stage if you take Messi out of the equation, where Guardiola would maybe sign a new contract this year. But I think he would only actually make that decision about whether he would honour it or whether he actually signs an extension midway through the season, depending on how the next few months go, depending on who they get in the transfer window, depending on how the season starts and the motivation of those players to go again. And I think if Guardiola looks at the squad and he thinks, I can't really get a tune out of them anymore, 5 years. Basically, I've taken them as far as I can, after 5 years. I think he would go. But if he looks and he looks around the dressing room and there are fresh faces and there's, fresh motivation and hunger, I think he would be like, well, okay, it's worth a go. And obviously, if you were to add Messi into that, I'd be amazed if he walked away after a year. If Messi signs a 2 or 3 year contract, I'd be amazed if he walks away after a year. But no, I don't think it's decided yet. I'm not expecting him to stay. I think it's to be decided depending on what happens in the next few months in terms of transfers and performances at the start of the season.
For what it's worth, I expect all this to wrap up by City being really close to signing Messi. He arrives in at Manchester Airport only to be met by Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, and he's swooped over across the city. Not as if it hasn't happened before. I know there's been some chat about it.
Seems to be how United do their transfers at the moment. So yeah, it wouldn't be surprised. Wouldn't be a surprise.
Or perhaps Messi might do a Robinho on it, Sam, and arrive thinking he's signing for Manchester City and ends up accidentally signing for Manchester United.
Yeah, and he says, "Look, I didn't even know there was a Manchester United."
Sam, thanks a million.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Sam Lee of The Athletic there with the inside track on Manchester City. Time for the papers.
OTB AM.
All right, running through the back pages before picking a couple of the stories out. The Irish Times begin with Tottenham. You can just imagine, you'll have to in your mind imagine the sound of papers ruffling here, but Tottenham closing in on the Ireland defender Matt Doherty, one of the main stories there. Rovers showing nerves of steel as O'Brien nails 12th penalty, an incredible night in front of almost no fans at the Tallaght Stadium last night to pair of Finland after Penno's drama there. Bohemians bow out with the pain of penalty shootout is the other story there in the Irish Times. Both sides of the coin for Irish teams. The Herald kidnapping Harry Fear, that's in relation to that Harry Maguire story. Charlie Rusholm is the name of the author there that I'm not sure is a real person. Charlie Rusholm, given the story that's he's writing on. He's written up the story from Maguire's interview at the BBC's Dan Roan yesterday. Maguire explaining panic in ensuing his arrest there. Mike McGrath has the pathway for Messi to remain at Barca. Wondered how long it would take on this one, but the club president saying that he's willing to resign if it means that Messi will stay on. We shall see. And a great photo in that paper of the Rovers players at the end of the penalty shootout last night. The Irish Mirror, COVID chaos is the main story on the back there. Pogba and 5 England stars, they say, test positive as fears grow for the start of the new season. And Pogba seems goes into isolation for 10 days. Ulster match is on, and some transfer news with Aubameyang getting a new Arsenal deal, according to John Cross, and Diego Costa being offered to Jose Mourinho as well. Racing Post talks about the racing funding crisis in the UK, a similar case here as well. The Guardian, COVID-19 hits the Premier League, Pogba, and they say 4 Chelsea players in isolation after positive test. Lewis Hamilton vowing to race on. We're not in the US, he says. And Naomi Osaka, 2 plays on. I was ready to concede, she says, in relation to her now rescheduled match at a tournament in New York. And obviously the US Open due to kick off as well next week. The Mail IRFU's relief, no new cases, means that the Interpros can go ahead this weekend. And doesn't that look nice, I think, will be the tab of the morning with the Joey O'Brien penalty at the death last night. GA must sort testing to stage championship is a line from Michael Clifford. We'll come back to in a few minutes. The Irish Daily Star, sick as a pog. A raft of positive COVID-19 tests leaves the Premier League sides facing chaotic start to the new season. The Sun, COVID chaos as well there, much the same. And Pep's already in talks with Messi, as we've been hearing from Sam Lee as well there over the last few minutes. That's in the Sun. The Times London edition, Messi told Guardiola that he was quitting, so there was a line of communication already up and running there. The Irish Independent, meanwhile, is a photograph of the winning Shamrock Rovers team last night. Has their main back page splashed there. And Croker unaware of any COVID outbreak on pitch, writes Colm Keys here in the aftermath of the interim Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Ronan Glynn, saying that there were some clusters arising from matches at sports. We're not sure exactly which variety of sport, but that's the reaction to that. And some IRFU relief, obviously, on the back of those negative tests as well. Larkham heaping praise on JJ Hanrahan is on the front page of the Irish Examiner this morning. And a green light as well for that Leinster-Ulster game. And Ronan O'Gara's column as well inside. The Telegraph Club fears after wave of positive tests. And a great photograph from the WNBA as well last night as they stand in solidarity with the Black Lives Movement campaign. And also a line inside from Tom Morgan and Ben Rumsby and Jeremy Wilson in relation to the Premier League's ongoing support of that campaign, of that movement. And they will continue to take the knee into the new season. So that's what's happening across the back pages this morning. Dave, there's a variety of things to get into there. We might kick things off with the where do you want to go? The Harry Maguire. You were looking at the Harry Maguire interview with Dan Roan at the BBC, I think, this morning. I think there's like 30 odd minutes of it. I've seen 4 minutes of it myself. He comes across as a very genuine guy with a very believable story.
Yeah, he really does. I've watched about 4 minutes of it this morning. I think it was the, kind of the juiciest, most important 4 minutes of that 30 odd. But it sounds like he's been through an absolutely awful experience. I mean, he was emotional just talking about certain minutes of it. His account in particular of the initial encounter with the Greek police is harrowing, as he's trying to get his sister into a Greek hospital because he feels that she's been injected with something. He's described how her eyes are rolling into the back of her head and that she's in and out of consciousness. And suddenly these out of uniform Greek police pretty much arrive in a way that he believes he's been kidnapped. And straight away he talks about how he got onto his knees and put his hands in the air. And it was them that started the aggressive tactics of telling him that they knew who he was and that his career was over and they were going to injure him. And if it was another type of a player that maybe had previous when it came to being a bit flash or a bit mouthy or a bit over flamboyant, you might just take a second to consider other options. But he's never struck me as a big time type of a guy. I've always felt in his post-match interviews and any time I've heard him been interviewed that he was quite a genuine bloke. Look, maybe we're being incredibly naive here. Some people may well accuse us of being so. But to me, this was a trial that seemed to ignore all the usual judicial practices. It was conducted in absentia. The defence had no time to prepare for it. It was rushed through. It was almost as if the Greek authorities were looking to make an example of somebody, perhaps with a longer term effect in mind. We don't tolerate antisocial behaviour from tourists on the Greek islands in any way, shape or form. This is what could happen to you. We will crack down quickly and aggressively if you step over the line. And maybe Harry Maguire is the victim of that. But I feel very sorry for him, and I hope that if it does go to an appeal, which it appears it will do, that it is a fair appeal and that it's an appeal that's done with transparency and openness and that we can really get some insight into what happened that night.
Yeah, and we don't know is the thing. You're 100% correct to say that, we may sound very naive around all of this, and we may look very naive in a week's time or however long it takes for the kids to run out. But we don't know, and we're going on the interview he's done with Dan Rowan. You listen to people like David Myler who shared a dressing room with him, and others who've come out in his support. We just don't know. But you listen to the interview, and he, as I said, comes across like a very genuine guy. It's a tone of something that Richard Dunn picks up in the Herald as well, Dave. About we can all be very cynical and churlish, I suppose, about Premier League players and the lives that they lead, but he talks about the nightmare that it is for Premier League players to go on holidays. I can only imagine. You probably suffer a bit of it yourself, Dave.
Oh, look, I can't go anywhere these days, Adrian, without being accosted by autograph hunters and well-wishers. And yeah, no, not quite. It does raise the whole issue of players taking downtime and going on holidays. And Richard Dunn does write about it in the Herald today. And Maguire actually referenced it in his interview with the BBC. The top players are often accused of being aloof, being completely disconnected from society and living in their own little bubble and have no idea what goes on in the real world. So here's a guy who's opted to go on holidays in a public space where he knows he'll be recognised, and this is what he's had to deal with. And I do think players need to think long and hard about their options when it comes to taking some time off. Are they better just taking themselves and some friends to a private villa somewhere, maybe chilling out for a while, maybe if they want to go out, book out a bar or a restaurant. It's not like they don't have the funds to do so, and just have it for themselves. But then you do that, and no doubt a tabloid picks up on the story. The usual naysayers crawl out from under a rock, accuse them from being disconnected from the fans, being too big time, too good to be slumming it with the ordinary folk at a regular bar or a restaurant. They can't win. But I'd say Harry Maguire regrets putting himself in that situation now where he's on a Greek island, just in a bar or a club that anybody can go to. You're the Manchester United captain. I mean, there are fewer, more high-profile players in England. You're the starting centre-half for Gareth Southgate's team. And there's always the chance that someone is going to think they can either make a quick buck or maybe impress their friends by saying something to you or taking you on in some way, either verbally or physically. I just don't know what the point of it is. And maybe players, even genuine guys like Harry Maguire, they just need to take a little longer in assessing what their options are when they're taking some time away. Now, there's the other repercussion in that we're living in the era of COVID-19, and the Premier League managed to get from June to the end of August, on mid-August, without a single failed test. a single positive test, which is an incredible testament to the testing procedures and to the bubble that these players were living in for the last portion of the Premier League season. As soon as these players disconnect from that bubble and start going all across Europe to their families and on holidays, we've seen out throughout the papers today the sheer number of issues as regards COVID-19 with England, with Chelsea, with Manchester United. So that needs to be taken into account as well. I'm not saying this is an implication for Harry Maguire, but players need to think very long and very hard about what decisions they make as regards downtime in the months and years ahead, because this is an example of how quickly and how badly it can go wrong, albeit an extreme example and probably a very rare one.
Apologies it's taken me this long to mention it, but have you started to work for Google?
Why is that?
Where are you? Have you just moved into your new house and it's like it's a warehouse that you've converted into a Google headquarters?
Yeah, well, given that I was only asked to come on the show on Wednesday, it's been a really hectic 2 days trying to get the room set up in this way. No, it's a new laptop, and it's a new feature of Skype that I only found this morning as I was connecting with you guys, that you can pretty much put whatever background you want. Well, there's an option of about 4 or 5. This is the one that I thought best suited my complexion.
There aren't many of those, but geez, fair play, Dave. Yeah, it looks good. So here, the COVID stuff, it's mentioned, just a couple of minutes on this one, but it's mentioned in an Irish context as well in some of the papers I touched on a little bit earlier on, including Mike Clifford in the Mail. He talks about GA must sort testing to stage championship. Talks about Professor Anthony Staines, who Michael Clifford tells us is a leading public health expert, and I'll take his word on that. But he says that the GA should consider putting a testing programme in place if the All-Ireland Championships are to proceed in the winter, and that if that's to go ahead. And also taken up by Colm Keys in the Irish Independent as well, where he says Croker unaware of any COVID outbreak on pitch. So this was in relation to the interim Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Ronan Lynn's update during the week, where he said that there had been, as in his own words, a small number of cases and clusters related to matches. So we don't know exactly what sport they're about, or we don't know, was it about players, was it about spectators? We're really sort of unsure about where all this is at. It does feel, obviously, over the last week, and I think that the evidence of it is there, or the last weeks, I should say, that there's an increasing number of cases and an increasing concern. We've obviously gone from a position of having some fans at games to a position where we should have no fans at games, unless you're one of the Shamrock Rovers 12 or whatever number it was last night in Tala. But yeah, like, I mean, it suddenly looks to me, Dave, that a lot of we're looking at the sheer number of Premier League players this morning that now are testing positive for COVID, and the increasing number of cases in this side of the water as well. We are increasingly looking at a scenario, I believe, where the Premier League, or a curtailed version of it, we may be looking at a curtailed version of the Premier League or of the GA Championships. The excitement about the possibility of looking at full seasons now is suddenly looking a slightly lesser prospect.
Yeah, it's I don't know how to look at the situation as regards to the Premier League. Because, look, we've mentioned that the bubble that they were in has been broken up while players take their couple of weeks off before a truncated pre-season gets underway, and they get ready for that September 12th return, which is just a couple of weeks away. It's different from the GA's point of view. It's not a pro sport. These players have to get up and go to work on a Monday morning. They have to go back to their families. They have that fear that there may be people who are a bit more vulnerable in their immediate family and immediate circles, that they would be fearful of infecting if they did pick up COVID-19. Ideally, there is a testing system in place for inter-county footballers where they can be tested as often as a Premier League footballer or a Leinster or Munster player or a golfer or whatever the pro sport example might be. But yes, ideally, but where can the funds for that be found? I don't know if it's possible. I haven't seen it been discussed in any great detail. The championship is on a knife edge, really, because I fear that 1 or 2 failed tests will put the whole thing in jeopardy. We've heard from the GA president, John Horn, over the last couple of weeks talking about the possibility of a county needing to step aside if there's an issue with the positive COVID-19 test. Given how short time frame they're looking to squeeze the championship into, any county forced to step aside for a week, 10 days, 2 weeks, they're essentially going to be out of the championship. And that will put a very different slant on the championship. If you were to win the All-Ireland in a championship where Dublin, for example, had to step out at the quarter-final stage because one of their players tested positive for COVID-19, how massive would the asterisk beside that championship be in the all-time Roll of Honour? There are so many questions to be answered. I think all the GA and those involved can do is just to try and get through the next few weeks and hope that nothing massive occurs that will derail the entire thing. But all the best plans put in place may not be enough. You hope that they are, but they may not be enough. We'll just have to see how it pans out.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting watch over the next while. Hopefully the sport remains on track and safely. So I should also mention OTBsports.com for you this morning. Plenty of good stuff up there if you want to head along and check it out. Shay is to blame, Paddy Bonner, on how Gift Grub contributed to Saipan. So Mario Rosenstock and Today FM were to blame, Dave, it turns out, after all. You can check out that full piece, Joe Malloy in conversation with two of Ireland's greatest the two of Ireland's greatest goalkeepers ever with our Cadbury Roadshow. That's up on OTBsports.com this morning. Some interesting thoughts from Brian O'Driscoll too. Johnny is the most stubborn man I know. Brian O'Driscoll on Sexton playing to 40. The thoughts there as well, and saying that interesting stuff too on the future of JJ Hanrahan at Munster, and that people just need to forget about the fact that he's running a Gara, that he's not, and he's a different player, and there's a different set of skills required for that team at the minute. And also Golf Weekly have had their say. The PGA Tour obviously released a statement last night, or yesterday afternoon at least, saying that they're supportive of the players, or of any players who would decide to strike in protest against the various things in the US at the minute. And Peter Lowry has had his say on that, saying that most golfers are selfish prats, and he goes into some specific reasons as to why that is in fact the case. That's all up on OTBsports.com this morning, so go along and check that out as well. You can get in touch with us wherever it is that you're watching. You can WhatsApp us 087 918 180. Myself, Dave, with you between now and 10 a.m. And if you've got that OTB Sports app already, if you have not got it, just search OTB Sports in your app store and that will come up for you. Right, Alan Quinlan's next. First, keep an eye out for a preview of the next episode of Andy Lee Meets. It's been a great series so far. He's been speaking to Cora Staunton. That's all in association with Seat and the all-new Seat Leon, their first fully connected car.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
The Saturday panel on Off the Ball.
There's a growing hostility towards cyclists. We're somehow seen as a nuisance, when in fact we're just people trying to get to work.
I've never ever gotten one bad word said to me about my sexuality, or from the opposition, or from, actually in one bad time, the girl was marking me so tightly, I was like, I have a girlfriend.
I'm not the person I was 10 years ago, and that doesn't worry me. I know I can play good enough golf.
Don't miss the panel every Saturday afternoon, only on Off the Ball.
I tried to stand up, but obviously my leg wouldn't support me, and tried it twice, and then I could just see it flopping, and probably not, my ankle wasn't going in the right direction.
And what's the immediate thought that goes through your mind?
Oh, like the immediate thing was shock.
Yeah.
I just, it wasn't pain, it was shock. I let out two screams at what I'd seen, and then I just laid there until the ambulance came.
Quadruple leg break. Most people don't come. No, like how?
It can be career-ending, but it can be probably a 12-month injury. But
yeah, but for most people, it's the end.
Yeah,
it's the end.
It probably can be. Yeah.
Did it ever cross your mind?
No.
You never thought about that.
No.
Did you look at your leg?
Twice I looked at it, and that was it.
Yeah.
Thankfully no bone came out through my skin. It was very close to, but I knew straight away it wasn't good.
And you were 37, not you wanted, but you were 37 at that stage. So there would have been people who thought that's the end of Cora Staunton.
Oh, I'd say the majority of the people.
Yeah.
And it was a story. I was being asked, from a psychological point of view, had you any doubts and what motivated you maybe to get back? And I always remembered 5 days after I had the operation, had to go to the club to see our doctor just to check my stitches in my wound to see was it clean and get it changed. And I was standing in the club at the time, waiting to see the doctor, and this guy, we won't name who he was, but was high up in the club in the men's department, came out to talk to me and see how my leg was, and he made a comment that day to me, we don't think he'll ever get back. And I just, at that time I was in a level of pain. This was 5 days after the operation. I just wanted to see the doctor and get home again. I was still, on a lot of medication.
He was a nice chap, wasn't he?
Yeah, and I always remember that comment. Anytime I was training, or I'd see him in the club, which you'd see him a lot, or I he was the guy when, you know, you've probably done an hour of cross training and you say to yourself, I'll do an extra 5 or 10 minutes, that you'll do it, because I just needed someone to give me that extra motivation.
But yeah, like I've read that about you as well, that and I've heard you speak about it, like, do you feel like, I don't know how to phrase it, but like people doubting you, you use that as that's a huge motivating factor for you.
Yeah, exactly. And some people mightn't even doubt it.
Throughout your career, not just this.
Completely.
Yeah.
And people mightn't even doubt you, but it might be the smallest thing that you'll say to. It was another story with my coach. He was dropping me home from the club one day, obviously because I wasn't driving at this stage. And I said, you know, something about the surgeon. I said, oh, he was excellent, you know, because I thought he was excellent in any of my dealings with him, you know, with my leg. This is probably 2.5 weeks after the operation. He goes, oh, we'll see how good he is in October, you know, as in when the season starts again, whether he'll get back. And I took that as, oh, he was doubting the surgeon and doubting me. So that was, again, it was just a little nugget of extra motivation that you need. And I've said it to him since, and he didn't mean it in that way.
Do you recognise that? Do you recognise that, though? Like, I would think that someone who's achieved all that you have achieved, and, you know, have the standing in your sports, and that you don't have anything to, me, you don't have anything to prove.
OTB Sports in your pocket. Listen to OTB Sports Radio 24/7.
Until that habit is broken, do you not realise how crazy those things were?
Watch your favourite OTB videos.
The benefit of being suspended, me and Scoresy were out every night, probably night before the game.
Read all the latest sports news and opinions, all in one place, the OTB Sports app. Listen, watch, read. Wherever you are, we're always with you. The OTB Sports app, available to download now from your app store.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
All right, it's 9:20 on this manky Friday morning. It has to be said, it's absolutely pouring rain, certainly where I am. It's myself and Dave with you until 10 this morning. We've deal or no deal to come a little bit later on. And Dave's reflections on the golf as well. That's the big hook, Dave, that we're making sure that people stay with us for this morning.
Wow. What a teacher that is.
You're on OTB AM, live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Alan Quinlan, good morning to you. Come on in.
Morning, lads. How are you?
How are you getting on?
Good, thanks. Yeah, not a bother.
We had you on during the week, but it was before the confirmation of the RG Snyman. Everybody suspected as much, but the severity of the injury, obviously, in relation to the AC, and we're looking at whatever it might be, 6 to 12 months layoff there. And the reaction to it, Quinny, has been the interesting thing for me, from all, including within the club. Maybe slightly at odds with the usual reaction that you get. You know, those sort of cliches about, listen, we've got great replacement, and one man's injuries, another man's opportunity, sort of thing. Like, it's been pretty honest about the impact of his loss and how much damage it's going to do to this team in a normal season. To try and quantify what that loss is, does it, his removal, move them from possible Heineken Cup contenders to not? Or how would you view his loss?
I think the level of player he is, Adrian, does probably take away that bit of excitement that was there, and it's gone from excitement to devastation. Really, he's a massive loss. I think you can build a game plan around someone that's impactful and that big and strong and athletic. And I know a lot of Munster's play they would have wanted to do, and things they wanted to do were revolving around RG Snyman and some of his carries. But he's having watched him pretty closely in the last couple of years, and I've done a good few South African games. I know he's come off the bench, but Etzebeth was probably the starting lock and another freakish athlete. So I just think that someone like him gets over the gain line, gets his hands through, makes lots of line breaks himself. So the level of his loss is just phenomenal for Munster. But I suppose after a challenging week of dealing with that and the disappointment, and I just think you could, even though there was no crowd at the game, you could probably feel the vast majority of people at home, maybe bar the rivals, particularly Munster people anyway, just going, the curse is struck again, and it's a tough week for him because Joey Carberry is as big a loss for a period of time. So it's been you think if Tyke Byrne, R.G. Sneeman, Joey Carberry, Matt Gallagher, these guys were in the mix for Munster, and that little bit of depth that possibly they need to take that next step to maybe be in a Champions Cup final, as it's a big blow for him. But it is an opportunity for Thomas Ahern, Fineen Wycherley, some of these guys but it's the depth chart, you know. I did the Racing game in round 6, their last, was it round 5, when they went out of Europe this year, and the impact off the bench for Racing was very, very telling, and the same type of impact didn't come from Munster, even though they put in a heroic performance. And we see how successful Leinster have been in the last number of years. It's just that depth in the squad and that level of player they have right through the squad, and that's what has to happen if you want to win European Cups. And but look, it's a massive blow, but they have no choice but to dust themselves down and say, well, look, we're one player, one out World Cup winner better than we were last year with Dialinde, who I was very impressed with. And but there's no doubt about it, Snyman will be such a massive loss. He'd be a loss to any team.
Alan, obviously it's part of pro sports, and as you say, the only option they have is to just get the head down and carry on. But I mean, human instinct is difficult to surmount sometimes. From your experience, when you get a couple of heavy blows to a squad's morale like this, how long can it take or can it be a situation where it's very difficult to get out of the funk? Because I'm sure there was a pall around the Munster setup when the news came through that the guy that we've spent so much time talking about, having learned about the deal so long ago, that he's gone essentially for the entire season.
Yeah, well, I think, like I said, there was lots of he trained unbelievably well in the last few weeks. He's had a real impact and inspired people around him to and excited people around him to play with him. He's 6'10". He runs like a winger when he makes line breaks. He's absolutely devastating in breaking up the opposition mauls. He's a line-out winner. And so I think they probably knew Saturday night, I think, after the game, when the physio checked him on the field, and they would have had a good check on his knee inside the dressing room. It's fairly obvious sometimes when you check the stability of the knee, how much movement is in it, that there's a major problem. So I feel sorry for Johan van Graan, because I know he's been under pressure, and this was a chance to, you know, really work with a top quality squad and way more depth in it. And there's a lot of excitement about some of the young players that have come through: Jack O'Sullivan, Gavin Coombs, John Hodnett, Craig Casey, Ben Healy, Jake Flannery, Jack Crowley, these guys, Thomas Ahern. You know, it's probably a while since Munster were able to name 6, 7, 8 young players that people are excited about. Coupled with the new signings, he was now getting a side, and, you know, Stephen Larkham, who only came in last September, didn't get to work with a lot of these players when they were away at the World Cup. I think a good pre-season with him, Graham Rowntree, that things were looking really up for him. And, you know, then with the Carberry news and the Snyman news, it's a setback. And I think with teams I've been in over the years, probably, and it's easy to say this, Dave, but if you dwell too much on the fact that such a big player is gone, you're saying, well, if only we had Sneeman, we would have won that game against Leinster. If only we had Sneeman, we would have won that game, you know, against Racing in Europe. And they just got to put it to the back of their minds now, and hopefully, you know, it's the end of August. If he gets his operation pretty quickly, he could be back within 5.5, 6 months. I know that from personal experience. I think the medics and the general public are talking 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 months. But there is a possibility he could be back after 5.5, 6 months. So what they've got to try and do now is make sure this side of Christmas that, you know, when the new campaign for Europe starts off, that, you know, come the end of January, they're in contention to try and make the knockout stages, and that, you know, it'd be an incredible boost to have him coming back for knockout stages next April if that was the case. So it is an opportunity for the younger players, but it's going to be hard for them to process it. And it's been a bit of a distraction because you can feel sorry for yourself and use it as an excuse. As I said, they have a very, very dangerous proposition in Connacht on Sunday. A game they have to win now. Scarlets are playing Dragons away. They get a bonus point win. I know Munster's points difference is good, but if Scarlets get a bonus point win and Munster were to lose the game and not get at them, they're not in the semi-final, so you can get easily distracted. They've got to win against the Connacht side, who we saw last Sunday were fantastic, and they'll certainly throw the ball around again on Sunday. And so they've got to get their focus really quickly again and put this behind them.
Yeah, and even, I mean, like he'll be focused on his recovery, I'm sure, in the short term, but having a guy like that around, some of the names that you mentioned, Quinny, that are coming through, I'm sure it won't do them any harm as well over the intervening period. It's not like as if he's entirely lost to them, a World Cup winner from a learning point of view as well. Will you just talk to us about, we were supposed to see a couple of teams last weekend, or 4 teams last weekend, who were rusty, obviously haven't been off for such a forced spell. And on the Leinster-Munster game particularly, like that toner steal at the end was a ludicrously dexterous play for someone who hadn't played in that long. We'll know more about Leinster obviously post the Ulster game this weekend, which it looks like it goes ahead. The Saracen game looms, Quinny. They've themselves had some good results after a bit of a sticky return to begin with. How impressed were you by Leinster last weekend?
Well, I think they'll be disappointed with probably with how close the game was at the end. I think Leo Cullen conveyed that after the match. I think they probably would have sat in the dressing room thinking it was too close for comfort. It just didn't have that feeling of a big derby win, because they were in a position of I think they were 11 points up at 60 minutes. They'll get better. Leinster will get better. They still have that. I think they just have a standard of performance and intensity and energy about whoever takes the field for them. I think that's what happens when you're a championship winning side, and they'll get better. But they've got to be very, very mindful. I know it's a couple of weeks away. They'll play Munster most probably in a semi-final and then a Pro 14 final. They'll want to try and wrap up the Pro 14 and win that before they really put their focus on that Saracens game. But Saracens are a bit like Connacht at the moment, which when you have it's a quarter-final of Europe for sure, but probably Saracens have some changes. They've lost some players, and the expectation will be that they'll come to Dublin and Leinster will win. It makes them a very dangerous proposition. They have some world-class players on their side and some real winners, and with Owen Farrell as kind of the main man there, I think their drive and desire to try and beat Leinster will be immense. So it is a very dangerous proposition. So they can't take their eye off the ball, but it's something they can't look too far ahead either. I think the coaches will be more so focusing, keeping an eye on Saracens, watching their games, trying to put together a team that'll start against Leinster in a couple of weeks. But it is a dangerous proposition for them, and Saracens will be coming to Dublin thinking, we've give this an almighty crack, and most of those players have won in Dublin before, whether it be with England, and they have that experience. So it's something that looms. It's a very, very busy period for Leinster in the next couple of weeks, and that's why obviously I think they'll make a lot of changes for the Ulster game tomorrow night. They'll be looking at a semi-final next week, and then from their point of view, hopefully a final, and then it's a run of 2 weeks of Europe as well. So it's a really intense period for them.
So you're not looking at that Leinster-Ulster game as a thing that's going to be a key. Like if they are going to make a bunch of changes, which I think is probably a fair enough point. Like are we going to get the 14 try game that we had back in December, the 12-point win for Leinster, or is there almost an element of a Quinny of keeping some of the powder dry with what's to come?
No, I think I think both sides will make a number of changes, and could be a completely new team for both sides. So you will see an open game. You will see guys trying to impress, throw the ball around, but they'll not be, putting out the playbook this early in the season, I think, and showing everyone their hands. I think it'll be players having a real go at themselves, and you probably will see a high-scoring game. I think there's more of my focus. Looking back on Ulster last Sunday against against Connacht. I think Leinster, the team that everybody looks at, particularly in Ireland anyway, the level of depth in their squad and the kind of standard that they have, even when their perceived second string goes out and plays. And I think Ulster last week were very, very disappointing against Connacht. They openly said they lacked spark. There was a lack of energy about their performance. Billy Burns was quoted as saying, well, we're a team that when we win, we get confidence. And I think relying on winning matches to build confidence, it does bring confidence, but I think being robust and resilient can make you confident, creating opportunities in games, not being soft and porous in defence. That takes away your confidence. And for Dan McFarland's side last week, even though they were qualified, they were in a semi-final, they knew who they were going to be playing. It was a very, very worrying performance for me, because they go to Edinburgh next week to play a semi-final and you can't just switch it on. And like I said, when you look at Leinster, they just seem to have a standard that other teams want to aspire and get to. And, you know, the players just know their role. They know the level of intensity they've got to bring to the performance. And that's something that Ulster didn't do last week. So there's a real emphasis on, even though he'll make a load of changes, Dan McFarland, that Ulster gets some little bit of momentum out of this game. It's a game they probably won't win, but they need to get some level of fight or bite in their performance before they go to Edinburgh next week, because if there's any more of the same, I don't think they can just go and turn it on in Edinburgh next week. Now, they have been hampered by some injuries, and Addison and Henderson, and Dan McFarland took off a couple of 4 frontline players at half-time, but I thought that was a mistake. He should have played them right through, try to win that game, made the changes for this week, and then be ready to go full metal jacket against Edinburgh. So that is a concern for me, and it's a bit of it's a no-win situation here. But I think there's a lot at stake for Ulster, I think, in their performance tomorrow night.
Do you think if Ian Madigan is in the starting 15 when the teams come out later today, Alan, that it's one of the few positions that McFarland will be watching really closely? Like, they did pick, for the most part, what would be considered to be their best 15 for that game against Connacht, and they were beaten in it. That at 10, and obviously that dictates an awful lot in terms of how that team's going to play against Edinburgh in that huge game, that if Madigan has a big weekend, and if he can be maybe one of the standout performers in a game that perhaps kickstarts that momentum you're talking about, that Billy Burns might be under a little bit of pressure. And this is Madigan's chance this weekend to show that he is still a real option when it comes to 10 for Ulster, and then in months to come, maybe beyond.
Yeah, I'm sure there's no way Ian Madigan signed for Ulster thinking he's going to sit in the bench. He sees an opportunity. He sees a chance to take on Billy Burns for that number 10 slot. Burns has been very, very good for Ulster. We've covered some of the games, and I think he's been superb. He's improved immeasurably in the last season. They've had some big wins in Europe. They got into they're in the knockout stages. They won 5 games out of 6. They beat Clermont in Belfast. They have a lot of good wins, and they've momentum gained under Dan McFarland. So I think Madigan would have seen a little bit of growth there. They still need to be far more ruthless, and he needs a performance. I think the Bundyaki try last week is, with respect to everyone, you just don't see that at that level, that a 12 runs from 15, 20 yards out and runs over your fly half and scores under the post. I know he's 100 kilos, he's very, very powerful, but aside from the fact that it's most fly halves would struggle to stop Bundyaki one-on-one like that, he needs more help and support from his flanker, from the centre, and it was that lack of spark and intent from Ulster that just summed up the whole performance. So if you're not going to protect your out half like that, it kind of sums up what the day has been and what it's been like. The only issue for me was Connacht's how it was that close in the end. There was only 6 points, so there's a lot at stake for Ian Madigan. He's a superb footballer. He's got to get a platform from the Ulster forwards and try and play a little bit. But it's not easy. You know, you're playing against a Leinster side that, even though there'll be loads of changes there, there's still a lot of quality there. And if he can put in a performance, yeah, he might force his way into contention. But I don't think Burns has done anything wrong, and I think he's been pivotal to Ulster making a little bit of progress and getting some big wins in the last year.
I don't think it's a surprise, though, is it, in a game where they have nothing to play for and they don't have anything like the competition for places that Leinster have. I mean, I put Leinster almost like in the same category as Dublin, the senior football team, and that, yeah, it may be a small enough game and it doesn't really matter whether you win or lose, but if you play badly, there's a good chance you're going to lose your place. That isn't the case up in Ulster. It's very hard for them to get themselves out of this funk until they get to a game where everything's on the line, like next week. The question is whether you can just flip the switch then. It's a very difficult thing to do.
Yeah, that's the danger, and that's why I thought, you know, when you're a professional player in any of these clubs, I think you've got to look at the rugby season in blocks of 4 or 5 weeks. That's all you can do, particularly with the planning and how the squad depth and a bit of rotation that's going to happen. And you can't play the same team 5 weeks in a trot. So I think that's where I think Dan McFarlane maybe should have kept all these players on last week, gone for that win aggressively with his best players. I know he's 5, 6, 7 players out injured, and that's in his defence. Some of them are top starters for him. They're international players. Henderson's a massive loss. Will Addison's a loss. Marshall's a loss. There's a lot of quality missing there and experience. But, you know, the potential of going in against Edinburgh and having no win in the first 2 games is not a great position for them to be in. And like you say, getting that little bit of momentum. So there's still a huge opportunity here. Even if Ulster don't win this game, they can take a lot out of it by creating chances, by being really strong defensively, by standing up to Leinster physically. You're going to see a Leinster side that's with a number of changes, but you're going to see guys playing who there's a real hunger for them to try and push and put pressure on the top side in Leinster, you know, and guys playing for contracts and their futures and all that kind of stuff. So it doesn't make it any easier, I think, for Ulster, but they've got to show hunger with their younger players, and the guys are going to come in that they have a future and they have an ability to step up to the plate when needed and try and get something out of the game. Hopefully it is a good game. I think you will see a fair few scores, but Ulster, you know, they've got to walk off the field with a bit of feel-good factor that they threw a few punches. They threw none last week.
Quinny, can we just ask you before we wrap some of the stories we were chatting in the newspapers earlier on about it was all led from the Harry Maguire situation where he was away on his holidays. Obviously, he was getting into a bit of bother. But Richard Dunn's been writing in the Herald this morning that as a player, summer holidays can be an absolute nightmare because you're being dogged for photographs and autographs and hassled and harried all over the place. Things may have quieted down for you, Quinny, over the last couple of years since you retired, but as a player when you're away,
what do you mean by
that? I said may, didn't I? That's leaving the possibility that it hasn't. But you know, when you're away, whether it's like at a group with players or like a private personal holiday, is it in your experience, I'm not asking you about Harry Maguire or any of that stuff, but in your experience, is it a hassle? Is it tough to like get away for 10 days or 2 weeks and enjoy yourself without having all the hassle of hangers on and whatever else?
It's different for different players. I think in rugby, it's by and large people wouldn't. You know, I've been away on foreign holidays with a number of players and on different occasions, and 99% of the time it's just goodwill from Irish people who recognise the group of rugby players, and they want a few photos and they want to chat for a few minutes, and we've never had any hassle. I think, particularly, I don't think if you know, there was 5 or 6 rugby players in a group that there'd be a number of locals coming over trying to cause hassle. That's never been the situation. So there's always a chance that something will go wrong. I do feel sorry for Harry Maguire, and I feel that the whole process was rushed through way too quickly. He didn't have a chance to defend himself, and these are the issues that are potentially can arise. And you know, the way the world has changed with social media and camera phones and people videoing you, it's much different now than when I went away. I've been away with, you know, some of the big names, if you like, Paul, Rog, people who, you know, they're players that everybody wants a photo with, everyone wants to chat to them, everyone wants to stop them on the street and stuff like that. And it can be different for them. But I think you've got to just be very, very careful and mindful of that fact, particularly soccer players. So we've never really had an issue. The only issue is someone hanging on too long when they've asked for photos and just hanging around with you a little bit. But by and large, it's never been an issue for the groups I've been in. But times have changed. That's probably 7 or 8 years ago.
Would you go out of your way to go somewhere? Would you be deliberately picking somewhere that was a bit out of the way, or would you be wanting to put yourself in the middle of it?
No, I've been in Cyprus, Greece, Turkey with rugby players and my own mates and some of their mates and big groups. And the only situation that's ever happens is Irish people want to get photos if they're passing by, and that's it. And I've never encountered any sort of hassle. But I say it's different when you're standing around with John Hayes with no top on, or Paul O'Connell, and they're not going to get hassled as regards an aggressive approach from anybody. It's usually only people looking for photos and stuff like that. It's a totally different world for the soccer players. But thankfully, we've never had any issues. They ask you, are you Irish, and they welcome you in, and that's it. You have we were in Turkey in 1998. It's a long time ago. There was 12 of us there, 7 rugby players and 5 guys who didn't play rugby, and we were welcome everywhere we went, and we didn't have any hassles with anybody, which was always great. But there is a danger. The world has changed now, as I say, with social media, and people are a little bit more intrusive. Harry Maguire's situation is different. He had an issue with people approaching his sister and stuff like that. I do feel sorry for him, but whether you're away on holidays or not, even if you're here in Ireland, I think it's changing, and the professional rugby players have to be mindful of that. And here in Ireland, that's there's people sometimes out there who want a bit of hassle and want grief, and it doesn't matter whether you're right. At the end of that day, when your name is kind of dragged into it, it looks bad and it tarnishes. So it's a crazy situation at times for people.
Yeah. All right, Quinny, thanks a million.
Cheers.
Thanks a lot. Alan Quinlan on the line there to look ahead to the weekend's rugby and a little bit more as well. We are about to bring you Deal or No Deal, but first, a quick reminder, if you're one of those people missing out on your dose of gridiron news, game reaction and analysis as well, be sure to sign up to our American football newsletter, OTB Club Gridiron. We've got the very latest off-season American football news from both Ireland and from the USA, from otbsports.com, as well as podcasts, long and short form video content, all included, plenty more as well. We'll have great prizes coming your way too, so do stay tuned and subscribe particularly for that. So otbsports.com/Club Gridiron, and enjoy all that OTB Club Gridiron has to offer. But right now, it is time for Deal or No Deal.
I signed for them after the Euros, and after my first day's training, I was driving home. I was actually thinking, regretting it. What have I done? Like I walked into a circus.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Right, Dave, your Google background and all, we got to put you through your paces here. So the thing is, I'm going to ask you for a ranking of 1 to 10 here, right? We've talked about Lionel Messi. We've got all the highly intellectual reasons as to why it may or may not happen from Simon Cooper and Sam Leno this morning as well, as to whether he's going to go to Manchester City. Out of 10, the likelihood that Messi stays at Barcelona for you?
I would say 0. I just cannot see how... I just can't see how he can possibly have a future at the club after the way events have transpired over the last week. He clearly wants to go, and Barcelona need to make some changes at the club. They won't necessarily want Messi there if he is absolutely adamant that his time at the club is over. I would be shocked if in 6 weeks' time Lionel Messi is still a Barcelona player. I'm kind of sad the way that it's gone, because it's been such a glorious partnership for so long, going all the way back to his early teens. I think Messi and his advisors have made a real mess of this. They knew the wording of the clause whereby he had to notify Barcelona of his intention to leave by June 10th. And once they knew that the pandemic was going to be an issue, if they really had it in their minds that he wanted to leave, they needed to discuss it with the club then, because now we're into a real grey area. They're saying June 10th still remains in place. Barcelona saying, well, no, the season only ended a couple of weeks ago. That's when that's the day we'll be looking at. So I don't know. Unless Barcelona's end of season implosion has utterly dictated his thinking, and that was what triggered in his mind the fact that he wanted to leave. But it's gone very far now. He said he wants to go. I'll be very surprised if he's still there in a few weeks' time. Maybe not quite 0 out of 10, but 1 or 2.
Nathan gave that a 7 out of 10, if I'm right, earlier in the week. So there you go. No, he did follow it up.
7 out of 10 that he is still a Barcelona player.
Yes, yeah. No, I think, to be fair to him, he did follow it up. You know what you're dealing with, Dave. He did follow it up with the chances of him going to Manchester City being 8 out of 10, I think. So, I mean, I don't know how all that stacks up. What about? I mean, if he is to move, I suppose, if we word it that way, if he is to move, City's chances are obviously 10 out of 10, right?
Yes. Well, what are his other alternatives? So there's
PSG,
Manchester City, and PSG are really the only 2 clubs that can afford him. I don't see Inter having the funds to bring Leo Messi in on the wages he's on, especially if there's a transfer fee involved. Do Messi's advisors genuinely believe that they can leave the Nou Camp for free, given that as of 2 months ago there was a 700 million exit clause in his contract? I doubt it. Maybe it might end up in court. Perhaps 2 clubs will come to an agreement, most likely the 2 clubs being City and Barca, and a transfer fee of somewhere around between 100 and 200 million is agreed upon. Look, we'll have to see how all that goes in the next few weeks, but you'll be almost certain that if he leaves, it is to City, yes, and the Guardiola link obviously being a major player, a major factor in that situation as well.
Do you get free lunch there?
In my house?
In Google.
You're giving an awful lot of free advertising to Google this morning.
Well, whatever. It could be Facebook, any of these modern technology companies. The Matt Doherty story, Dave, obviously continues. It looks as if it's almost certainly going to happen now. There's plenty of stories over the last last 24 hours about swap deals and how much money Bohemians stand to make out of this. It does look as if they will get their 10% out of it, out of the valuation of the player. And on that valuation, like, he's expected to go between 12 and 20 is what they're talking about here. The question maybe is, how much of a bargain is that? Like, if he was English, would you be looking at a multiple of that number?
Oh, absolutely. I don't know how much of a multiple, but you're probably looking at doubling it. Like, he's a fullback playing for Wolves, and he's 29 years old. So he's closer to the end of his career than he is the start. Ask the question, is he a better fullback than Aaron Wan-Bissaka, who went for 50 million to Manchester United? The difference being that Aaron Wan-Bissaka has 5 years on him, or maybe it's even more. But are they very similar in terms of their ability at the moment? I would think so. I think no matter what way you dice this up, it's an incredible deal for Tottenham. Yeah. And I'm surprised Wolves haven't held out for a little bit more. I think he's going to settle in very quickly into that Tottenham team. I think he's just the kind of player that Jose Mourinho will like to work with. And I think it's brilliant for Doherty. Although you would hope that it doesn't upset the upward trajectory he's been on for the last 3 seasons, because I can't recall him playing badly for Wolves in that time. He turns in a 7 out of 10 performance pretty much every time he takes to the field. But he's now playing for a club that is going to be in Europe. Wolves just very narrowly missed out on playing European football, and maybe that, albeit it is the Europa League, maybe that was a tiny aspect of the thinking on Matt's behalf when he was deciding whether or not to make the change and leaving a club he's obviously incredibly settled at and incredibly happy with. But it's a new challenge for him, and you would hope that he's done very well for himself in terms of the personal terms, and we wish him all the best. I think it's a really good move for both parties. I think Wolves are the losers in this deal, because it's not like they've got a fee with which they can go out and replace Matt Doherty with a player of a similar or a better calibre.
Yeah, the Damien Duff stuff. Do you remember the Jose Mourinho, like Duff, Jose turned him into a defender, etc., etc. How do you see the relationship? How do you see Doherty developing? Maybe put it that way under Mourinho.
Well, it depends what sort of a lineup Jose Mourinho is going to put out there. Doherty's obviously been used to playing on the right side of the Wolves midfield in a wing back position where there are 3 central defenders in place. Jose has gone with that system sometimes, but often Tottenham are playing with a flat back 4, which means that Doherty will likely have to play in a right full back position. So, and a little different to what he's become accustomed to, but I don't see that being an issue for him. The full backs at Tottenham last season generally didn't get forward as often as, say, Doherty would have done in his wing-back position at Wolves. So whether it was Ben Davies or Serge Aurier, depending on which flank you're looking at, I would hope that Matt Doherty does get a chance to show what he can do going forward, because that's been a huge part in the reputation that he's built for himself at Wolves. He is great with the ball, and he's great getting ahead of the ball, and he's got a really good delivery with that right foot. So let's hope he gets to show that at Tottenham. I think Jose Mourinho will be looking to do exactly that, so hopefully that is the case.
The office is extremely quiet, by the way. I know, Dave, it's a work from home thing, so you've just been allowed to go in and everybody else needs to stay at home. Is that what's happening?
Well, I
haven't seen one person walk around behind you, like.
I made the call and asked everybody just to stay away until I was happy that I was done with my job this morning and I could go home then, because that's the sort of clout that I carry in Google.
Last one here, right? There's a few bits and bobs, but we'll just do one more before we wrap in this because I want to get a word with you on the golf. United obviously failed to buy Jadon Sancho now. Where do they need, in your view, to strengthen? And who needs to be replaced in that first 11?
I think they need to strengthen in several areas. They definitely need a centre-half to play with Harry Maguire. I'm a fan of Victor Lindelof, actually, because I think he's wholehearted and he'll give you everything that he's got every time he plays, but he's just not of that world-class quality that they do need, particularly with Harry Maguire, who is lacking in a couple of areas. And as we saw in the Europa League semi-final against Sevilla, when it really comes to the crunch, those two couldn't be trusted to get the job done. So a world-class centre-half is required. I do think they lack a really top-quality midfield player to play behind Pogba and Bruno Fernandes. And I think they need a centre-forward as well. I don't know if Anthony Martial is good enough to be in that Lewandowski category, Van Persie category before he left the club, and be ranked up there with some of the top strikers that Manchester United have had over the years. He's had his best goal-scoring season, 23 goals, and at times he's looked really capable, but there's just always that nagging doubt I think a lot of people have with Anthony Martial. And then a lot of people talking, and people who are better educated than I in these matters, that they needed a right-sided attacking player, and that's where Jadon Sancho came in. That deal looks, if not dead in the water, close to it, because all the talk around it seems to have been diluted in the last couple of weeks. So I don't really know if that's going to happen. But they need to spend a lot of money, and they probably need at least 3 players. But Ole Gunnar Solskjaer has been very clear on that. He has said that from the get-go, that he knows they have to bring 3 or 4 players in, and they'll only be brought in if they're improving on the quality that they had there already. I haven't seen them being linked with anybody of real consequence in the last couple of weeks since the talk on the Sancho deal went quiet.
All right, just before we wrap, deal or no deal, I see that Vera Pauw said that Denise O'Sullivan, one of the standout players of the Irish team, is to join Brighton and Hove Albion on loan from North Carolina Courage. So that's to happen as well. But that's this morning's deal or no deal.
I signed for them after the Euros, and after my first day's training, I was driving home. I was actually thinking, regretting it, what have I done? Like I walked into a circus.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Normally at this point of the morning, Dave Owen Shane will take us through a detailed plan of his activities for the weekend. I know that you'll be glued to the golf. I was looking at it a bit last night, the BMW Championship from TPC Boston. Was it a story? I just had it on in the background, if I'm being honest, and I'd stick the head up every now and then when I'd see Rory or Tiger or whoever else it was that was coming around. But it struck me that most of the times I looked up, like Rory's par putt in 13 from a couple of feet that goes more back in the opposite direction. Tiger had something similar around the same time for a par on the 8th. Was it a story of bad putting yesterday? What was your main takeaways from it?
No, it wasn't really. It was McIlroy I think he had 8 pars in the entire round, which gives you an indication of how topsy-turvy it was for him. Just a little correction before our Golf Weekly listeners or golf fans in general set upon you. TPC Boston was last week at the Northern Trust. They're in Olympia Field. Of course it was, yeah. In Illinois this week, just near Chicago. So it's I think McIlroy will have been delighted by the way that he finished yesterday, albeit he did finish with 5 pars, but he ground his way through the round yesterday. And that is not something you could have accused McIlroy of doing in the last few weeks. I mean, for him to finish 28 shots off the lead last weekend is an absolute farce. And it's obviously the sign of a guy who had completely and utterly checked out by the time he got to Saturday and Sunday. There's no way Dustin Johnson is that much of a better golfer than Rory. So I would think he's used this week as an opportunity to give himself a really fresh start and to go at this tournament and try and generate some momentum, which is completely lost during and post-lockdown, because he was one of the form players in the world before the pandemic hit and the season was suspended. And since he's come back, he's looked like an average journeyman golfer that is slumming it at the bottom of the leaderboard with some of the players that the casual golf fan will literally have never heard of. So it was impressive to me that he managed to get around and level par last night. There were only 3 players under par in the entire field of 70 players. And McIlroy is only 3 back going into today. So he just needs to back it up today. What struck me most about what I watched last night was that the setup had almost a major championship feel to it. And I think it was a welcome respite from the ridiculous conditions we saw last weekend. No golf course that the pros play should be in a position where it can be taken apart to the point where the winner has shot 30 under par. Because it's not fun to watch. It's not a test of the greatest player in the world. I stopped watching about an hour into Sunday when I realised what we were watching was a non-event. So if it's for that reason that I'm probably going to watch a little bit more this weekend, because it actually looks like it's going to be a true test of these players. And hopefully it's a sign that Rory McIlroy is getting back into it mentally and emotionally, and that his game is starting to turn in time for the rest of the playoffs. And then obviously the US Open and the Masters, which are going to be upon us before we know it.
Yeah, it's a great run. I noted Tiger afterwards, so he finished in 3 over par, which you say is still in the context of where Matsuyama's at on 3 under par. Is not exactly a million miles away even now, but he cut a very frustrated figure afterwards. And I noted that the reporters were giving him every excuse under the book. I don't know if you spotted that afterwards, but it was like, would you like here's another one? And one of them was like, what about the heat, Tiger? It was pretty hot out there. And he just responded with, I live in Florida.
Yeah, I'd say Tiger was very annoyed by how he finished his round, because he bogeyed the last 3 holes, and it's very difficult to answer questions when microphones are put into your grill so soon after walking off the golf course, where you feel you should have left so many shots behind you. But the heat is something that Tiger is supposed to be comfortable in. It's when it's not warm that the reporters give Tiger the excuse of saying, well, you don't really do well in cold weather. The back tends to seize up. We've heard Tiger talking about his glutes failing to activate in the past. And anytime a major is being played in conditions that aren't nice and warm and comfortable, that Tiger can be written off, as was the case at the PGA Championship a couple of weeks ago, where in San Francisco, the fog and the mist and the dropping temperatures were conducive to Tiger's body working in tandem with his golf swing. So I'm not sure. I think Tiger was probably just a little bit annoyed with the manner in which his round ended last night. Mm-hmm. And it is easy to give Tiger excuses, because if he's functioning mentally and physically, that he's going to be a factor. I just don't know how often we'll ever see Tiger contend in tournaments nowadays. It's going to be fleeting. When he does contend, he probably wins, as he showed at Augusta and as he showed in Japan at the back end of last season, when he equaled the all-time PGA Tour win record. But you would hope that there are a couple of occasions between now and November that Tiger can show us that he's going to be a real contender at Augusta National, because that's what everyone wants to see. You might not want him to win all the time, but you'd love to see him contend.
Yeah, having said all that, he's going to go on ahead and win this tournament by about 10 shots.
I really don't see that happening.
The curse of the kiss of success. Dave, thanks a million. You go and enjoy your free coffee and jacuzzis and whatever else you have going on there in your technology enterprise behind you. Thanks a million for this morning. Good man.
Cheers, Adrian.
Thanks a lot, Dave McIntyre there, stepping in for Owen Sheehan. Here's what's on the way on OTB Sports Radio today. The Paddy Power half hour live at noon today. Preview the weekend's football action, the Community Shield, some EFL Cup as well. At 3 o'clock, we're live again with Friday Night Racing. At 4, it's Team 33, League of Ireland Legends interview, this time with Pat Fenlon coming into the spotlight. And at 6, OTB Gold, where John Malloy sits down with Ruby Walsh. And then we're back live from 7 on air and online. We'll be with you right across the weekend as well. If you haven't already, download the OTB Sports app. It's everything you need. Get on there, type OTB Sports into your app of choice, and you'll be able to download that there. OTB AM live in association with Gillette. Good mornings. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. But that's it from us for this morning. Back at 7:30 on Monday morning. Good morning.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Paddy Power. A more electric team-up than Salah and Mane. Gamble responsibly. See dunlewy.net.
It's Friday afternoon. It is time for the Paddy Power half hour. Coming up over the next 30 minutes or so, we will be looking ahead to the Community Shield, which will pit Liverpool against Arsenal, the winners of the Premier League and FA Cup in England last season. A bombshell dropped by Leo Messi this week, where he has decided to leave Barcelona. The club say they want 700 million for him to leave. He believes he can leave for free. We're going to be looking at where the Argentine genius could end up for next season. Chelsea have been splashing the cash this week. Thiago Silva has arrived today. They signed Ben Chilwell for around 50 million during the week. And it looks like Kai Havertz could be another 100 million burning a hole in their pocket currently. We'll be looking at Matt Doherty's prospective move to Spurs and the windfall it could see for Bohemians of around €2 million. We'll talk about Bohemians in Europe this week. Shamrock Rovers progressing on penalties, but Bows losing out on the spot kicks, and Celtic out of the Champions League qualifiers at the earliest stage they've been the Scottish champions since 2005. To break all that down, we're joined by Emmett O'Keefe and Phil Egan. Good afternoon to you, gentlemen.
Hey, Will. How's it going, Will?
Phil, I'll start off with yourself. Community Shield comes around. I mean, it's felt like a very short pre-season as we get into the traditional curtain raiser for the English season, and Liverpool have picked up an injury with Virgil van Dijk during the week in a friendly, but this has come around remarkably quickly.
Yeah, I mean, the word there is Van Dijk is fine. It was a bit of a knock. But yeah, even that game against Salzburg the other day, you could see Liverpool players were heavy-legged. So they were probably having morning sessions where Klopp was doing a lot of running with them. And obviously, Ryan Brewster comes off the bench and scores a couple of goals. But it's a strange one in the fact that usually we get this game and then the following week the season starts. But obviously, there's 2 weeks in between this. But it's something Klopp has talked about in his press conference in the last hour or so, where they knew the game was coming. It's a good game to have. Obviously, Arsenal finished the season strongly. Only played that cup final on the 1st of August. But, you know, he's trying to make a few signings. The Aubameyang contract hasn't been signed yet. But obviously, Arsenal, not only did they beat Chelsea in the cup final, they beat Liverpool as well at the Emirates, which was the strange game where Liverpool just were their own worst enemies by gifting Arsenal 2 goals. But yeah, it's one of those games where you don't really, if you win it, it's great because you get a bit of silverware if people actually count it. If you lose, people just say, well, it was only the Community Shield. But that's pretty much how the narrative will go after. If Liverpool win, people will say, yeah, Liverpool look good. If they lose, well, they lost last season's Community Shield to Manchester City, so they didn't care. If Arsenal win, Arteta, yeah, things are going to be so much better this season. He's got his, he's going to have his first full season. If they lose, then it'll be Arsenal have a lot of ground to make up in Liverpool. That's usually how it runs.
I would imagine as well, Phil, when it comes to this game, it'll be seen as a meaningful friendly for both clubs to play before their players are released away for international duty, and then they come back for the start of the Premier League. I'd imagine it's a game that Arsenal and Liverpool won't be too unhappy about having.
No, and I suppose we've seen in the last few days as well, with players going to play international football and they've been away on holidays, certain players, Paul Pogba and Tanguy Ndombele, obviously were withdrawn from the France squad because they tested positive for COVID-19. So there's that dynamic that has to be thrown into it as well, where obviously Klopp and Arteta will be able to pick close enough to their first teams, but then in 2 weeks' time, who knows what effect the international break is going to have on certain squads, because basically once clubs let them go into their international groups, it falls on the international squads and the players themselves to make sure that they stay as safe as possible. But yeah, I think you're right in the fact that it was a strange end to the season, obviously, and for Liverpool, obviously, having the season wrapped up so quickly. They lost games where, obviously, they were beaten badly by Manchester City. They lost to Arsenal, and people wondered, was that just down to the fact that they'd wrapped up the league, or was it, people thinking that maybe Liverpool people are trying to work them out? Personally, I think it was just a case the league was wrapped up, they took their eye off the ball, and they played in second and third gear.
Emmett, can I ask you about Arsenal? Because they finished the season pretty strongly. They registered those victories against Liverpool, Man City, Chelsea at the tail end of the season. It seems Mikel Arteta very much determined to do things his own way. He's got this kind of mini pre-season now to be ready for the season starting at the end of next month. How do you fancy Arsenal are going to get on, first of all, tomorrow, and then in a more general sense, going into the 2021 season?
I think
Arteta's kind of started Arsenal. It reminds me when Pochettino came into Tottenham originally, and the way he's kind of, I think, trying to set kind of non-negotiable standards. And certainly you've seen a far increased work rate from their forwards in terms of their high pressing game. To me, one of the most interesting angles about the game at the weekend would be the debut of William Saliba for Arsenal centre half. That's clearly been a problem position for Arsenal for many seasons, with the likes of Mustafi, Socrates, etc. have obviously struggled. Arsenal signed him for a sizable transfer fee of around 27 million last summer, but he was loaned back to St Etienne last season. Despite being only 19, he apparently was outstanding in League One last season and looks a pretty big prospect. This week, Arsenal also seem to be on the verge of signing Brazilian centre-half Gabriel Magalhães from Lille. So I think potentially one of Arsenal's biggest weaknesses the last few seasons is clearly being addressed. And I think if at least one of them became a legitimate Premier League centre-half this season, I think it would go a long way to improvement. I would still be concerned about the midfield, and obviously the Aubameyang saga is rumbling on. But I think despite maybe some of the problems above him, I think Arteta is doing a very good job, and I think Arsenal are possibly a team on the up.
I suppose, Emmett, have a few problems to solve. Mesut Ozil, trying to get him off the books. He seems quite determined to stay around and see out his contract unless Arsenal probably pay him to leave the club. As you say, they probably need to get a little bit of reinforcement in midfield. But they've looked at their defence. They've got a good goalkeeper in Bernd Leno, a good backup goalkeeper as well in Martinez. And then you look at their strike force, lots of young players coming through. If they can get 2 or 3 important pieces of business, including that Aubameyang contract sorted out between now and October, they're probably not in bad shape for an assault on the top 4 next season.
Definitely. I think the Aubameyang one is quite interesting as well, because my own personal feeling would be that the best long-term decision for Arsenal would be to sell him. Given his age, I think it's going to be hard to get a significant transfer fee for him after this season, given he's in his 30s. And I feel as well Arsenal aren't going to be challenging for the title next season. And I also really rate the Arsenal's young striker Gabriel Martinelli extremely highly. I think between him and Lacazette, I think they could fill some of the void that Aubameyang might leave. But as you say, if Aubameyang did leave for next season, it would give them somewhat of a hit.
What do you think, Phil? Arsenal ahead of next season?
Yeah, I take Emmett's point about the age and the profile of Aubameyang, but I just think in terms of the message it would send to Arsenal before the start of a season, if they cashed in on him, it would basically say, we're surrendering that momentum we built at the end of last season, and Aubameyang was key to that. It was him that won them the FA Cup. Obviously, he's their captain. I know they probably don't want to get stung, but I don't think it's the same situation as somebody like Mesut Ozil, where obviously Aubameyang won't command as much of a salary, a weekly salary, but also he gives you so much more than Ozil. And Willian's been a good signing as well. I think we're going to see a lot better from Nicola Pepe, who showed glimpses, but definitely he was one of those players in the last few games of the season where you could start to see the quality. And it was his first season in the Premier League, coming from France as well. If they get the business done at the back, obviously Saliba, he's so young. It was interesting against MK Dons the other day. He went with 3 at the back. I just don't think Arteta wants to play 3 at the back, but at the moment, because of the deficiencies in there, he feels that that's what he has to do. And Kieran Tierney's part of that back 3, but you would like to think that Tierney's going to be your left wing back if you're playing at 3. That's where Magalhães, if he comes in, he's a left-sided centre half. He can play there, and then obviously you free up Tierney to play as a wing back or just an orthodox left back. And we didn't see the best of Tierney because he was injured, but there was sure signs at the end of last season just how good he is.
Phil, when it comes to Liverpool, back-to-back 90-point plus seasons, finally getting the monkey off the back in terms of ending that 30 years for an English League title, perhaps will be a bit disappointed they didn't go further in the Cups and particularly in the Champions League. But they've resisted going out to sign players during this transfer window so far. We'll see what develops over the next 6 weeks or so. But it seems they're going to be going largely with the squad that they had from last season. Is that squad good enough to go deep back into the competitions and to defend the Premier League title again? Yeah, well, I mean, they did this last summer where they didn't sign any significant players, and people thought the fact that they'd run City so close, I mean, a point behind them, and they thought now is the time to invest. But Klopp had confidence in the squad that he had, and then they go out and they absolutely
walked the league and could have won it by more, but as I said earlier on that they kind of went into second gear for the last few games of the season. They needed a left back. They needed backup for Andy Robertson, a natural left back, because Milner and Gomez obviously played the Merseyside derby after the restart. They can do a job, but they're not natural left-footed players. So Tsimikas was a good signing for them. Minamino was brought in January, and he didn't hit the ground running. That's not a concern. He's look at some of the players Klopp has signed. You think of Fabinho, took him a while to get into the team. So Minamino looked even sharper the other day, where he's going to play a more he's going to have a bigger role to play next season. And look, there is a slight concern with the front three that if something happens, one of them, or if you want to take one of them off, what's the backup there? Klopp has been talking today about Ryan Brewster. He came off the bench the other day, scored the 2 goals, also scored against Stuttgart. They don't know what they're going to do with him yet, whether they keep him or they send him out to a Premier League club on loan for the season. I know Sheffield United's a club that's been mentioned, but Minamino is an option as cover for Roberto Firmino. But Origi, I always felt Origi should have been sold after the Champions League final that he scored, and that was the highest value that he had. And there's just still too much of a drop off when something happens to the front three or you don't start them. But midfield, if they get Thiago, that's where Klopp is going to do most of his rotating, because obviously there's going to be so many fixtures this season, and that's your engine room. That's where you got to make the changes. So if he gets Thiago and keeps Wijnaldum, he's got plenty of options. Even if Wijnaldum goes, we don't know what's going to happen there. It doesn't look like he's getting a new contract, but he might be happy enough just to see it out and play this season and then go on a free next summer. But no, Liverpool are still the team to beat. The reason all these clubs behind them are going out splashing the cash is because they have to close the gap.
Yeah. Emmett, do Paddy Power still see Liverpool as favourites for the Premier League next season?
Not at the moment. So currently the prices are Man City 8-11, Liverpool 2-1, Chelsea 11-1, and Man United 14-1, with the Arsenal outsiders at 45-1. I think
very clearly a 2-horse race. So
it's interesting though, because I think when the prices opened initially, maybe about a month or so ago, Chelsea and Man United would have been bigger prices, and they have been backed in somewhat. I think if I would expect Chelsea to sign another goalkeeper, and I'd say maybe you need at least one more centre half after signing Thiago Silva today. So I could see of those prices, maybe Chelsea's prices shortening a bit. Because last season, say, as is kind of well documented, Kepa had the worst save percentage of the Premier League and one of the worst in Premier League history. So I think that's clearly a position they need to address.
Our football coverage here on Off the Ball is with thanks to Paddy Power. Phil, when it comes to Chelsea, they're splashing the cash. This was one of the factors that was brought up repeatedly when people were assessing Frank Lampard's first year in charge. He didn't have a transfer window to start with. He had to play the kids. Well, he spent 2 summers worth of money already in the first couple of months of this transfer window. Yeah, absolutely. It's like he was stuffing all his money under the mattress, and now he's just gone wild in the sales. Now, they're not. I don't know how much value he's got in the sales, but the bottom line is Chelsea needed players. Definitely think that the goalkeeper is an issue. Obviously, by the end of the season, Caballero was starting, and it's never a good sign if Willy Caballero is your first choice goalkeeper. Kepa, it's rare you see keepers that when the confidence gets drained out of them so much that they can recover at the same club. You see glimpses where mistakes come in or they creep in, but Kepa just looked like he had absolutely no confidence at all. The mistakes were there as well, but also the defence had no confidence in him at all either. So if they don't get a new goalkeeper, it's all well and good having the likes of Timo Werner and Hakim Ziyech, and obviously we expect Havertz to get done, and Thiago Silva's there, Chilwell's done. But if they don't have a good goalkeeper, there's still going to be question marks about the defence, because it's all well and good having a better defence, but if your goalkeeper isn't up to it, then that just leads to nervousness. Those games where you're 1-0 up or you're a goal up and you're trying to see it out, but you don't trust your goalkeeper, that just puts defences on the edge. And then also it just gives confidence to opposition teams, knowing that, get a shot on goal here, and this keeper isn't the keeper that Chelsea thought they were getting. The world's most expensive keeper certainly hasn't lived up to it. Interesting point you bring up, Phil, because I was speaking to Kenny Cunningham a couple of weeks ago on Off the Ball, and I asked him about the recruitment at the time that they were being linked to Thiago Silva, and the feeling was they would get Chilwell over the line. They've both happened this week. He reckons it's less so the personnel at Chelsea, given that it was largely the same defence that Maurizio Sarri had worked with, and a lot of the players that Antonio Conte had turned into a good defence a couple of seasons previously. He reckons that a defence coach is probably more important than players coming in, because a lot of Chelsea's problems were conceding at set pieces. They were organisational problems on the counter-attack. Is that a bigger issue than the actual players they're going to bring in?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is something we're going to see. If they line up, say, against Brighton, they're playing Brighton in the opening weekend, and they start with Chilwell and Thiago Silva in their team, and they're still conceding goals from corners or set pieces, that would suggest they're not coached well enough, that they don't know, the players in the team don't know what their role is when they're defending set pieces. And Lampard's obviously a new coach. He's had his first season in the Premier League. He's had a season in the Championship. You know, he was shortlisted in some places for the Manager of the Year award, and, you know, it made a lot of people laugh. He did okay. You know, he didn't have a transfer window to work with. He obviously lost Eden Hazard. It was his first job in the Premier League. You know, there was moments where you thought, yeah, this could work. But the pressure is on, because when you spend that cash, you have to back it up with results. And, you know, if they start slowly, or if they lose a few games early, don't forget they're playing Liverpool early in the campaign as well. And there'd be a nice bit of needle given what happened at Anfield a few weeks ago when Lampard and the Liverpool bench got a bit lippy with each other. So, yeah, there's going to be pressure on him. That free pass that I think Lampard got, and some, especially Manchester United fans, probably were scratching their heads thinking, why does Lampard not get the same abuse that Solskjaer gets? But, you know, the honeymoon period is very much over for Lampard now.
Emmett, when it comes to defenders going to London, Spurs are about to sign Matt Doherty. Right back's been a bit of an issue since Kyle Walker left. Serge Aurier had a few indifferent performances last season. It looks like they've gone for Wolves' rampaging right back, and he's going to be the most high-profile Republic of Ireland player in the Premier League in terms of at least where he plays next season.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic to see an Irish player kind of moving to the upper reaches of the Premier League for kind of a significant transfer fee. My only concern would be that it would be a kind of a classic Mourinho move, I would say, to sign a player and then play him in the position in which he wasn't excelling. Because I firmly believe that Doherty is a unique kind of player. I don't think I think he's definitely much more of a right wing back than a conventional right back. The way he kind of gets on the end of crosses and is like plays nearly like an attacking midfielder for Wolves sometime. And I'd be worried that Mourinho would kind of play him as kind of a solid right back and not let him cross the halfway line that much, because I don't think that's the way you get the best out of Matt Doherty. But I'm delighted to see Doherty get the move, and hopefully he gets used in his right position.
Phil, that's a genuine concern. Mourinho doesn't generally like to push his fullbacks up too far. He tends to be defence orientated when it comes to his fullbacks, while Matt Doherty played most of his good football with Wolves overlapping on the right hand side, sometimes even coming inside to get the ball. Could he be restricted at Spurs under a Mourinho system?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you look at Serge Aurier, even under Mourinho, he did get forward, but the weakest part of his game was defending. So Doherty is certainly a better defender than Serge Aurier. In terms of maybe what it does for Stephen Kenny as well, probably not a bad thing from an Irish point of view that he will be playing as a more orthodox right back. But I still think he'll get chances to go forward. And, you know, with Mourinho, we know there was a few moments last season where you thought, how's this going to end? Well, we know how it tends to end with Mourinho. It's when it ends. And this is his first full season as Spurs manager. And maybe if it doesn't go great for Matt Doherty, the only plus there is Jose Mourinho probably won't be around for much longer. That if a new manager comes in, they could say, right, I've seen how you played at Wolves, and I want you to play like that for me. So Mourinho will obviously have his ideas, but I don't think Mourinho is going to be hanging around that long, because, you know, there's just too many better teams than Spurs in the Premier League, and that'll annoy the hell out of Jose.
But I'm not sure if you've got the price in front of you. I could well be putting you on the spot here, but how are the bookmakers seeing Stephen Kenny going into his first few games as Republic of Ireland manager?
Yeah, no. So we have the match prices for the Nations League anyway. So we're against Bulgaria. It's 15-8 Bulgaria. The draw 2-1, and the Republic of Ireland 13-10. I'm intrigued to see how we set up, and just I think for the first time in many years, I think I'm I'm really looking forward to it. To kind of, I know the Nations League isn't a friendly, but it's not quite a qualifier either. And I normally wouldn't be looking forward to these games at all, but I actually am really looking forward to this, to see how some of the young players are used. And I feel like I know Phil referenced that we'll be playing a back four, but I really think we should try playing a back three. I think Seamus Coleman is made for a kind of a wide position, a back three. I don't think he's the engine to go up and down the line anymore like he used to, but he's still very solid defensively, as you saw in the Merseyside derby after lockdown, the way he shut down Sadio Mane. I think him, John Egan and Shane Duffy would be an excellent back three. And then playing our two most consistent Premier League performers, which would be Enda Stevens and Matt Doherty in the right positions. I would love to see Kenny try that out.
What do you reckon, Phil? I mean, he has in press conferences mentioned that he's not entirely wedded to four at the back. He's not entirely wedded to any given system, that he'll put players and a system together that fits the squad best. There is that potential that he could go to that exact back three that Emmett's just mentioned.
Yeah, I agree with Emmett. It's perfect. Yeah, like you have Enda Stevens and Matt Doherty who are suited in the wing-back roles. Seamus Coleman plays that role that Azpilicueta played so well for Chelsea under Conte, where because he's a fullback, he is just so used to sweeping up. So it works well. The thing is, Stephen Kenny's been asked about this so many times, and it just always seems, what I take from it is that he's more inclined to go with a four at the back, whether it's a 4-3-3 is the way he says he wants to play it, but it can become a 4-5-1 in defence when you're behind the ball, and that just seems the way he wants to play. But yeah, it's exciting times, because even the squad now, you're going to see fresh faces. You'd be looking forward to seeing what his first team is going to be. Does he go, if he does go four at the back, does he go Doherty or Seamus Coleman? I think if you're going to play four at the back and you want your full-backs to go forward, he'd have to go with Doherty. But then, you know, I mean, that's not an easy call to make. And Stephen Kenny's finding out from his first squad naming the other day where he left out Michael Obafemi. Now, I don't know if Obafemi didn't put that tweet out, would there have been as much of a reaction that he was left out? But
probably not. I mean, it does beg the question of whether he was spoken to about whether he was going to be in the under-21 squad or not. Like, you would imagine that conversation would happen. Look, I'm not bringing you into the senior squad for these two games next month. Want to see how you get on with the under-21s, and we'll see what happens with the next senior squad for the qualifier the month after.
Yeah, and given the fact that the 21s are very much in the mix for qualifying for their first tournament, that it wouldn't be the hardest sell to say to Michael Obafemi, look, Jim Crawford's in charge now, you know him, you played with the 21s before. We'd like to see how you get on. These are really important games for us as well. And, you know, obviously the potential then to see how you get on in the Premier League with Southampton. Obviously Southampton finished the season very well. Obafemi got his goal at Old Trafford as well. And then you can work your way into it. But this is what I'm saying about Stephen Kenny is he's going to find out, well, I'm sure he already knows, but every decision you make is going to be scrutinised and criticised. Some people will praise Stephen Kenny for certain decisions, but just the way football is nowadays, the way social media acts, that if you make the wrong call, for example, you pick Matt Doherty over Seamus Coleman and it doesn't work out, you just leave yourself open for all sorts.
Yeah, results business, and unfortunate to have to start off with three so important fixtures in his first month and a bit as manager competitively. Emmett, when it comes to Celtic, I was reading a press release from Paddy Power this week that you guys have now odds against to be in charge at the end of this season, that there's a chance he could walk before the end of the campaign, despite Celtic going for 10 in a row. I'd imagine a huge amount of that is motivated by the fact that it's going to be tricky for them to qualify for the Europa League now, with two more rounds to navigate after going out of the Champions League early. And also his comments about many players now looking to leave the club, and that he could facilitate those exits before the end of the transfer window.
Yeah, definitely. I think as well, given the lack of gate receipts for the foreseeable future, I think like Scottish teams need that Champions League revenue much more than the English clubs, given their lack of TV deal there. I think this season, with the lack of gate receipts, there would have been a huge premium place and making the Champions League. So it's clearly a huge disappointment. I'm I'm sceptical of how. I know Lennon has an excellent record at Celtic, but his record away from Parkhead is fairly middling at the likes of Bolton and even in the lower reaches of the Scottish League. So I'm not sure how much of a loss he'd be, but I think certainly not making the Champions League was a bit of a disaster for Celtic.
There you go. They've got a job to get there. The Irish team's had a mixed week in Europe. Derry and Bohemians losing out, but Shamrock Rovers progressing very dramatically on penalties last evening. That's something we could probably talk about next week as they prepare for round 2 of the Europa League qualifiers. Dundalk will be in action in that round as well. And my thanks to both Emmett and Phil for joining me on the Paddy Power Half Hour, and we'll chat to you soon.
Football on Off the Ball
with Paddy Power. A more electric team up than Salah and Mane. Gamble responsibly. See dunlewy.net. Friday Night Racing
on Off the Ball.
Brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. Visit hri.ie.
You're welcome along to Friday Night Racing. As always, we stream live every Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock. You can watch back on all our social channels, or you can catch us on the radio just after 8 o'clock right here on Off the Ball every Friday evening. Delighted this afternoon to have a special guest, a Galway legend. And Johnny Ward is here as well. It's the old ones that are the best ones, Johnny, aren't they?
I could tell halfway through the sentence where that was going, to be fair. But yeah, I still had a little bit of a smile.
Good. I'm delighted. Derek O'Connor is our Galway sporting legend, not Johnny Ward. Derek, great to have you with us.
Thank you very much, guys. Good to join you.
A man, I'm told, as comfortable riding winners at Cheltenham as he is at point-to-points. We've a lot to talk to you about. Talk to us about the point-to-point circuit, because I know that's coming back and it's been one of the many events stalled by COVID-19, and it's one of those, I guess, Johnny, I'm sure he's going to go into detail about, and you've spoken about it before, Johnny, of the frustrations of the professional game and how that's been stopped and people can't get to the race course. How's it affected the point-to-point circuit, Derek?
The cut-off date when the points got postponed in March, that was a big hit because a lot of people were dependent on that period of the year, you know. A lot of horses were ready to run, and that's where a lot of the income is earned when you're dealing with point-to-point horses. So they prepared their horses for that specific time of the year, March, April, May. That's when all the prime sales are on. And so when the racing got cancelled, it was a big hit on the financial income for a lot of the handlers and a lot of investors in the point-to-pointers. So it was a big hit now, in fairness. But hopefully through the autumn, if we get a clean run of it, it'll sort itself out.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I was actually wondering if it was the opposite to the professional game, which obviously racing needs to continue because there's such a sizable industry around it. And yes, we want people back at the courses watching racing, but there's enough of a sizable industry to keep going anyways. Whereas I would have often thought actually with point-to-point, it's almost as much about the social aspect in local communities that has been lost a little bit. And whether or not that is going to be gone as well when it does come back in September, that for an awful lot of people, their summers are around these point-to-points and they travel around the country and they all know each other, and that's a huge loss to a huge community.
Yeah, the community aspect in a point-to-point is massive. It takes a lot of people to run a local point-to-point. It takes a huge kind of mass of people to come together and to pull together and work together. And then there's great camaraderie, and so it brings a kind of a really local aspect to the point-to-point. And it is a wonderful occasion to have it here in County Clare. The Quakerstown Easter Sunday is possibly one of the best of the whole year. You know, the crowds could be 2,000 people, which is a very large crowd for. So they bring them here, and Quakerstown Easter Sunday, and you know, I can understand.
Sorry, Derek, I'm just going to stop you there. Actually, the line is breaking up a lot. We might try and get you up on the phone. Actually, it might be a little bit clearer. So hang tight there. Johnny, I might just chat to you about this, and we'll get talking about Derek and his career and one of the great Irish amateur jockeys over the last 10 or 15 years and all that he has achieved. From that side of things, from the social side of things, and I know down in Galway there's plenty of point-to-point meetings throughout the year. it is that loss of the social side as much for people that is hugely damaging.
Absolutely, you know, point to points are very much about the people. They're a real grassroots event, and the handful of point to points I've been at, they're very different to a race meeting in that they're kind of, you know, tied into maybe the local hunt, but they're essentially run in a farmer's field, which for that day becomes a race course. And I just think that concept itself is kind of really cool in this day and age, that the field that housed the horses, or the field that did whatever it did for the rest of the year, for that Sunday, you have all these cars and lorries coming down these country roads to go to points that have become really professionally run. And my first point was in Gillette, which is in Cork, and it was a really, really nice experience. Not only was the quality of the racing like really good and better than you get at a lot of race meetings, it was the community spirit. And I remember like buying a bowl of soup, and the bowl of soup, the money that you paid for the bowl of soup went to the local, I think it was the local camogie team or the local junior ladies football or one of the local GA teams. And points do not get the rights money that the racetracks get. So there's a challenge for a lot of race meetings, particularly not so much maybe the provincial tracks, but some of the bigger tracks, to kind of maintain that relationship with the community, when effectively the race courses are really, really, they survive now primarily because the media rights money is such a good deal, that they're not, the race courses could survive with less people there. Points really couldn't. They need the support of the local community. And when you go there, it's the most beautiful atmosphere. And the betting ring at a point can be far livelier than at the racetrack, because there's no betfair, there's no people on their phones having a bet. There's only one way to bet at a point, and that's in the betting ring. And the point I was at, I counted 18 bookmakers.
Right.
And Derek was on about the crowd at Quakerstown, like, you know, very good race meetings struggle to get crowds anywhere like the 3,000 that he's mentioning there. And the 3,000 people, they're paying in. You know, the money goes to, you know, maintain the point. And it's probably a bit like comparing club football and inter-county football. That inter-county football is obviously the behemoth or whatever, but the club football is kind of where it's at for the local people. And it's also the fact that there's such a connection to each horse. The local farmer will prepare his horse or her horse for that meet. And as much as it's become uber professional now, and you will get a point-to-point winner selling for more than a maiden hurdle winner. So you get a point-to-point maiden winner that could cost 400 grand. You know, like, it's serious money, and it's become highly professional. So it's kind of slightly in that halfway house now between being that really old amateur grassroots pursuit and something that like is actually involves an awful lot of money. It's somewhere in between, but it's still a fantastic day's racing. And I suppose to finish up, a point without, you know, the race scores is a bit like what James Connolly said. You know, Ireland without the Irish means nothing to me. Point without the people there really doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, Derek O'Connor is back with us on the line. Derek, Johnny Taylor talking about the joys of point, and I guess how the lines have been blurred as well. So in so many parts of racing between professional and amateur, and there was maybe a time years ago where point was almost seen as the Wild West of racing. That's anything but right now. It is very much, for many ways, for jockeys, for horses, for people interested in the game, it is a stepping stone to that professional level.
Yeah, it's a lot of things, Nathan. It's a very, very professional outfit. A lot of very professional outfits are involved in point at the moment, and invest heavily in it. They buy a lot of expensive store horses in the sales. They prepare them. They provide a lot of employment in their local communities. They prepare them to the best of their ability, and they win with them or get placed with them, and then move on to future trainers down, future owners, or future in England or in Ireland. We provide a very important kind of stepping stone for young horses in the national hunt industry. It's a big industry now. There's a lot of people, a lot of employment in it, a lot of money moved around. And, it's very, very important in Ireland.
How different is it riding in a point to riding in a maiden hurdle?
Would you believe a lot of pressure when you're riding point of points? You ride the maiden hurdle, and you're 9 times out of 10 you're riding for the prize money. But when you ride a 4-year-old horse in a point, there's a fair chance you're riding a 6-figure sum horse, and your decisions in the race are very, very important. And that's a hell of a lot of money. and people don't realise the pressure on amateur jockeys from time to time when they ride these horses and point points. They think that it's fairly low key race, and it's point of points 3 miles over fences and a farmer's field. It's far from it. It's a very, very professional outfit, and a lot of pressures on jockeys. I'd find it much easier to go to a festival and ride around the favourite in one of the festival races than would in a 4-year-old maiden that smokes a lot of money. There's a lot of pressure on that day, you know.
Yeah, it certainly does seem that way from what Johnny was just saying there. Johnny, we're going to get back to Derek in just a moment. In terms of that step up then, and when you're looking at horses, and I know you've owned horses yourself, like the calibre of horses that have come through from point to point in Ireland in recent years, it really has become an incredible breeding ground of talent.
Absolutely. I mean, you look at Envoy Alan, you know, where he came from. He's such an exciting horse. I'm just watching Albina here at Curra. She's making her first run back.
Johnny, you did enough live illegal broadcasting last night with the Shamrock Rovers penalty shootout. Don't do it again.
Yeah, it was illegal, but I think it was probably a moral thing to do. But yeah, just you know, Faugheen, all these horses that have come through that route, and they're bought with the view that they're going to become sort of top chasers, and obviously that ties in with the fact that point to point is probably an alternative to bumpers in a way, instead of and maybe it's a better education for horses as well to run in a point to point than a bumper. And you know, Envoy Alain was the most gorgeous horse, but like himself and Malone Road, they after point to point, they attracted really, really huge sums of money at the sales, and it has become the go-to. The stats, I don't have the stats offhand, but the amount of Cheltenham winners that came via the point-to-point route in Ireland is quite staggering, and it's just a brilliant breeding ground, a brilliant nursery for what can become top-class horses.
When did that change happen, or was that always the case, Derek, in terms of those top-class horses? Or was there a turning point for the point-to-point game in Ireland over the last decade or so as to how people looked at it and how useful it could be as a prep for the professional game?
Yeah, it was always in Ireland at a very low key. There was a couple of major big names. Tom Costa was probably the most infamous name, and Paddy Berry, he was another brilliant supporter of the point of points.
I think we should call him famous rather than infamous, Derek. There, just so we don't really want to know legal bill or anything.
Right. Okay. Well,
don't mind him.
Famous. So they produced it, and Tom Costa produced wonderful horses down through the years. Best Mate is probably the most obvious one, and so did Paddy Berry. But a lot of people kind of copped onto this, and then the demand for horses in England got greater, and they were demanding more and more Irish horses. So then you had other people tagging onto it and producing horses in true Irish point points and selling them to English customers. And then the sales companies were the next thing to come on stream. So the sales companies started providing platforms for us to sell the point pointers. So they put on these boutique sales in race courses in Cheltenham, in Punchestown, in Newbury. There's in Aintree. There's numerous race courses in England and Ireland that are putting on these boutique sales, and they provided a platform. So that kind of heightened it to another level again, you know. So we went from a very basic grounding with a very small number of trainers to the sales companies providing platforms at all the big stages for us to sell the horses. So they started making lots of money, and people seen it as a good business, and rightly so. You know, we're developing young national hunt horses, producing them to win point points at a very high standard, and you can easily tell their ability. And then they're fetching huge sums at public auctions, on boutique sales, at big race meetings. You know, it's kind of fairy tale stuff in a way, but it has grown over 30 years to get where it is today. And I don't know the statistics for Cheltenham winners, but I can tell you it's very high. And some of the most exciting horses at the festival just gone were all Irish point-pointers. Just Envoy Allen, Shishkin, Fernie Hollow. Like, are they the most exciting novices you could talk about? Fernie Hollow could be anything when he goes jumping fences. Envoy Allen could be anything. Shishkin, they could be, you know, you can be sure they're Grade 1 horse, but they could be Gold Cup horse. They could be anything down along the line. Like, so the Irish point of points are responsible for the grounding them horses got. So I think we all are a little bit proud of what we do in Irish point of points, but we can't rest on our laurels either. So we're constantly trying to improve tracks, improve riders, improve handlers constantly trying to improve their facilities, and we're constantly trying to buy better horses keep the standard high. So it's work in progress, but I think it's going the right way.
Yeah, how difficult is that in terms of the facilities available compared to your average racetrack, where you rock up to these sometimes giant farms once, twice a year, where it's almost a pop-up race course? How difficult is it to ensure that standards, as you say, you're talking about horses that are going on to become very valuable horses, are of the level you need for jockeys, for trainers, and for the horses themselves?
Yeah. You know, the hunt committees that provide the tracks select their farmers' ground. So they in an area, in a hunt area, say the Galway Blazers or the North Clares are my two, or the County Clares are my two hunts that I'm close to here. So they would select a track within their region, within their county or within their hunting region, and it has to be of a high standard. And then Ballaconnell of the Turf Club would go and inspect it months in advance of the Point of Point, and so he would liaise with the Point of Point committee. He would line out different things he'd like to see done on the track. That would be drainage or gaps opened or different layouts or the placing of the fences. So there's a professional aspect to Ballaconnell's input. He's thoroughly professional. He inspects racecourse all over Ireland. So he's the main Point of Point inspector. So he inspects the track, and then so months of preparation, ground preparation, and then the farmer isn't allowed to stock it, so there's no poaching. So really and truly, you're dealing with a very, very well laid out, professionally maintained track. The idea of a point-to-point field, a farmer's field in the west of Ireland, that's gone. Like that's of old. You know, it's a professionally laid out track handled by professional people.
What's the best horse you've been on in a point-to-point?
Oh Jesus! Oh God! Jeez, you should have prepped me for that one. I've been lucky. Yeah, I've ridden a few good horses now. Yeah, thanks for the God. God, First Lieutenant was a hell of a horse.
Right.
God, he was a Gold Cup horse, wasn't he? If things just stayed happening for him. God, you caught me in the hospital. There's been lots of them, thanks for the God. Yeah.
We'll come back to it at the very end. You say you've been lucky. You haven't been lucky because you're brilliant at what you do, and you were the first jockey to win 1,000 point-to-points. I think you're up well over 1,100 at this stage. Do you know the exact number?
I've gone over 1,200 now.
Over 1,200?
Yeah, we're going grand, thanks for the God.
The question, and excuse my ignorance, it's the one question I always ask amateur jockeys, is when you are that successful and you've had victories at the Cheltenham Festival as well, why are you an amateur?
Oh God, I'm an amateur. I really, really love the point-to-point scene. It's in my family heritage. My mother was a point-to-point rider, and all her family, and it's in my heritage. And I suppose I really, really enjoy it. And I've other jobs, obviously, for my income. I work as an agent for Goffs UK, the sales company. I break and pre-train horses here at home. So I've different lines of income. And I just really enjoy the point-to-point. So it's not necessarily for an income I do it, it's because I really, really love it.
Right.
Yeah.
Looking at your statistics, so you're champion amateur in 2003, 2004. I think you had 141 rides that season, around 100 for the following two seasons. And then for the next decade or so, it was almost around 60, 70 until the season before last when you had over 100 again. Does that just depend on other work as to how many rides you take, or how do you balance out your year?
Yeah. I suppose a period mid-career there, I was solely concentrated on point-to-points, solely concentrated. I knew nothing else from September right through to June. Everything was just solely based around point-to-point racing and going point-to-point racing. It was in a right busy period of the boom, and there was just the horse industry was gone through the roof. There was horses everywhere. Every Tom, Dick and Harry had a horse to run, and they're all going point-to-point. And I suppose it was just very, very busy working and schooling and working with trainers. And the track rides then disintegrated because of it. I lost out on all my good contacts that I built up in the years previous. But I built up, in the meantime, I built up brilliant point-to-point handlers and brilliant point-to-point trainers. So there's a balance in everything. But I think my track racing declined, but as the figures will show, the point-to-point racing went through the roof for a few years. Yeah.
It's also the standard of riders in the point-to-points, Derek. I mean, you're taking on Barry O'Neill and Jamie Codd and so forth, and these lads just they're no way whatsoever out of place against the top national hunt jockeys.
Yeah, Johnny, sure, come here. If you watch Jamie Codd, and come here, we've seen it. There's no guesswork in this. We've seen Jamie Codd in Cheltenham and in all the festivals. He can line up below at the start in any race with any professional, and he looks better than most. Barry O'Neill also, Rob James, riding the Cheltenham Festival winner this year. The standard of rider in Irish Point of Points is just top class, and I'm not like talking it up. It's facts, because these lads have gone on to compete in professional races against professionals and are able to compete and look as tidy, as accomplished, as tactical. No problem to them. But it goes without saying that the Point of Points are that competitive. So you have to ride to a high standard to be successful. There's no half measures anymore. You have to be very fit. You have to be very dedicated, and you have to ride to a high standard to get on nowadays.
We are talking to one of Ireland's greatest ever amateur jockeys, Derek O'Connor, here on Friday Night Racing. It's brought to you in association with Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. The one thing I always think of in the amateur-professional divide is injuries, and you've had your fair share of injuries. And if you compare your life to, and maybe it's always going to be an unfair comparison, but a Ruby Walsh or a Tony McCoy, if Tony McCoy breaks his elbow, his plan for the next 6 weeks is to rest up. His job, essentially, for the next 6 weeks is to rest up and get that elbow right as quickly as he possibly can and get back on the track as he possibly can. You break your elbow, I guess, with your job with Goffs UK, you probably got to be back at work the next day.
Yeah, but I'm in a great position. The job with Goffs UK isn't... you don't demand a whole lot off me. It's a wonderful position for a jockey to be in, to have a backup plan.
Don't be saying too much now that you've got a soft gig.
Yeah, I know. I hope they're not listening. No, they don't demand a whole pile off me, to be honest. I represent a company here in Ireland, and run up the sales. I liaise with potential sellers, and at the sales I liaise with potential buyers, and I work hard to get the best horse I can to the sales, the national hunt sales, and I'm trying to break into the flat sales a little bit, but I'm finding it difficult. The interest isn't just the same as it is with the national hunt horses, but no, it's very similar to the Point of Point role for me. It's a job that I really love doing, and when you like doing a job, it's not hard work. Then sure, it's not.
It's not really a job either.
That's it. That's exactly the way I feel about both jobs. Yeah.
McCoy would obviously often talk about his obsession with winning. Do you have that obsession with winning, or do you have a more sort of wholesome approach of your racing life that, yes, winners are important, and here you've had any amount of them, but that actually there's a bit more, you can take a bit more satisfaction from young horses, helping them progress, that there's another side, that it's not all just about being first past the winning post?
Oh, do you know, Nathan, it's a lovely feeling when you work closely with a trainer, and you're involved at all stages of that horse's education. When I break a few horses at home, so maybe sometimes I break the horses and then they'd forward onto the trainer. So from breaking through schooling to galloping, maybe race course gallops, and then to team up with that trainer again and go racing and win. And then the next step is to go to the sales, provide a place in a boutique sale in Aintree for that horse, invite them over, get a nice position in the sale for the horse, and then liaise with potential buyers and get that horse sold. So it's a brilliant feeling, but that's 9 or 10 months of interaction with a trainer and a horse. But when the end result is a good payday for a trainer or an owner in a boutique sale, it's a wonderful feeling. But it carries on, because the horse goes to a good trainer in England and he progresses to the race course, and you see that horse coming out and winning and progressing and hopefully being the next Shishkin or the next Fernie Hollow or whatever the horse may be. That's what's very, very pleasing about the whole thing.
And on that note, so Derek's riding a horse on the point in Ahabolo on a Sunday. He knows this horse is worth a good bit of money, and he knows that its value depends on its performance in this race. So how does Derek approach the race with a view to winning the race, but also making this fella look as good as possible?
Oh God, what you do? You prepare as normal. You arrive at the track early. Well, you presume the preparation has all gone free, and you liaise with the trainer, and you discuss all the needs for the horse. So every horse has a particular need. They're not all carbon copies. They're not all made from the same grain, you know. So some horses want stiff tracks, some horses want soft tracks, some horses want hilly tracks, flat tracks, all according to their breeding, their family, their pedigrees, their style of racing, the amount of schooling that's gone into it. So there's lots of things to consider before you go to the races. So once you've liaised with the trainer and you've decided between you, or you've helped the trainer decide what suits the horse, so the preparation's gone well, the horse is fit and the track suits on the day. So the jockey goes and you walk the course, you make yourself familiar with the course, you're familiar with the ground, and it's like every race course, there's soft patches and hard patches, and there's tight corners, and there's tricky fences. So you familiarise yourself with all them things on the day. We declare an hour before racing, so the intended runners are only fully known 1 hour before racing. So you familiarise yourself with the opposition. What I do then, I don't really familiarise myself with jockeys because it's just not something I do. I go to the start, and what jockeys are there, I know them all. I don't really need to familiarise myself with jockeys that much. Trainers, a lot of trainers have particular styles of running their horses. So once you know the horse and the trainer, you have a fair idea their style of running in the race. So once you have all that kind of information built up, you just proceed with the race then, and hopefully it works out for you.
How different is that then from a big race such as the Irish Gold Cup, which you won in 2018 with Ed Wolfe, which I think got Ride of the Year, where you're riding for Joseph O'Brien? You're not finding out just an hour before the race who you're going up against. You're with a trainer who is methodical in the way he works and in terms of his plans. How different, and is it something you need to get your head around from time to time of, all right, I'm not just rocking up on the day and discovering who we're going up against. Actually, there's a well thought out plan that I need to execute here.
Yeah. You know, Nathan, the ride in Ed Wolfe that day was quite simple. It was to hunt around and let the race develop and produce them late and hopefully win. There wasn't a massive amount of discussion or thought went into it. It was just, we knew the horse, we knew the opposition, we knew everything all in advance, and it just worked out quite well on the day. But, you know, and he's a seasoned horse, so there isn't a whole pile that can go wrong mid-race. You're not looking for bad jumpers, you're not looking for inexperienced riders, you're not looking for bad ground. It's quite easy, not easy, I suppose it's wrong, it's easier, I should say, I suppose.
Yeah, geez, I'd love, Johnny, if a jockey came out someday and said, if it wasn't for me, that horse was screwed.
Yeah, Derek is, he's fairly humble, to be fair, because you are dealing with an absolute mortal in point to point, and but it's, I think as well, Derek, it's not a game where you're just not going to, people will not tolerate a fancy Dan. Like if the best rider or one of the best riders has any sort of hint of arrogance about him, like it's just not that game at all. You are among your own people, and win, lose or draw, you're all kind of friends at the end of the day, and it's very grounded.
Yeah, sure. The unfortunate thing about horse racing is it's a very, very short flight of stairs from the top to the bottom, and it takes very little time to get down there. So you have to be humble, because you never know, the fellas you were mean to on the way up, you could be passing them on the way down.
It almost seems surprising when you talk how professional the point-to-point game has come, that it hasn't almost been hijacked by the big business side of it completely. Like Johnny's talking about going to a point-to-point, and there's 18 bookmakers, there's none of the big bookmaking firms involved in this, that somehow it's managed to remain in its sort of organic state somehow. Do you expect that will continue, or is there always a worry that maybe it's simply just not possible and it's always going to be that feeding ground and everyone's happy, that it becomes almost too professional, and that, again, as is happening in a lot of racing, the little guy is going to be squeezed out of it?
It could happen. Unfortunately, it could happen. And I think the period that we're in now with the coronavirus and the lockdown and racing behind closed doors, it's going to drive people away from point-to-point racing, and I think we need to be very careful about it. the one thing that people love is going, dressing up on a Sunday and going off with the kids and the family and going point-to-point racing. And a nice Sunday, when there's nice facilities on site and then there's good racing, there's no better way to spend a Sunday. But when you can't go racing and there's no facilities to watch it at home, there's no online streaming, or there's no facilities to watch racing from home, point-to-point racing from home, people are going to find other hobbies and other ways to spend their Sunday. So I think there's a period of time here we're going to have to be very careful, or we're going to lose a lot of people out of point-to-point racing.
Yeah, I think, on that as well, Derek, it's one of those things like the coronavirus case figures each day are obviously a cause for concern, and when you have Donnelly coming out this week and saying that it's another lockdown is possible and all that, and people are obviously fearful of what's to come, but the prohibition on people attending sporting events, as Nathan referenced, I was at the Shamrock Rovers game last night, and a really unique occasion in which it was a penalty shootout with 26 penalties and 2 goalkeepers taking the penalty. Joey O'Brien, a fullback, taking 2 penalties and scoring the winning one, and there was nobody there to watch it. And a point to point for rural Ireland, for you to ban people from going into a field to pursue something that's very dear to them, it's quite sad. And it's also a lot of elderly people. There's a nice kind of spread of ages at point to point. Lots of men, lots of women, female riders, male riders, female trainers, male trainers. Kids go there to have a day out, roll in the muck, have a bit of fun. Elderly people love it. They've been going there for years. And what these bans that have been enforced from a room in Dublin have done to rural Ireland and Gaelic games and local games, I think it's sad and it's very damaging, and really it's completely illogical in my view.
In your view, I think we should say, Johnny, because obviously, particularly with elderly people, that they are trying to protect them, particularly in these scenarios where, yes, it might be a big wide open field, but again, the weather turns and suddenly people are congregating together. And yeah, it's a very, very difficult and sad situation. And I think, Derek, something you touched on there, something that's come up quite a bit actually from a lot of sporting organisations, is that people's entire routine in life has changed. So volunteerism, suddenly people who, whether it was GAA, rugby, soccer, horse racing, who gave up a huge amount of time and invested it on a Saturday and Sunday, have realised, geez, there are actually other things you can do in your life, and that they may get out of that habit, and you may struggle actually when it returns, which at this stage could be 6 months, a year, God knows when, that they may struggle to get back into that habit again.
Yeah, definitely so. We're not going to lose everybody because people in rural Ireland, and if you're from a horsey background and it's in your family and it's your family commitments there to go racing every Sunday, you're going to find something else to do for a period of time, but you're going to go back to it. But there is people that are going to be lost because there's other like nice Sunday walk there down the beach or something where you're not really putting yourself in any danger, any health dangers. There's simple activities you can do. It's unfortunate, but I think once racing resumes, once point-to-point racing resumes behind closed doors, we're going to have to do something, maybe some kind of live streaming or something to keep people involved. I'd love to see that happening. If that was something that the IHRB could organise, it'd be wonderful altogether.
It is interesting as well when you mention that, because like I think the streaming of sporting events like for example the League of Ireland, that has become both of the Europa League games yesterday were on streams that you bought, and it's something, Derek, I'd say that because even actual footage of point-to-points is a relatively new thing, and you can kind of watch all the races back now. But you'd imagine if you could stream point-to-points live, particularly for English race goers and English kind of prospective buyers, there would be a market out there for it.
Yeah, I do you know what the problem is, and I'm not well versed in it. I think there's television rights, and it's complicated who has the rights to the actual footage taken on the day. Would it be the IHRB? Is it the point-to-point committee, or is it the landowner? And it's like everything. When there's money involved, it always gets messy. If there was free, and free as in no cost at all, live streaming through a Facebook or some kind of a social media, where there was no money changing hands, that people could log on at home and watch the point-to-point racing for nothing, sitting on their couch, to keep them involved, keep them interested for a period of time. Trial it for a period of 2 months, 3 months to see if it works. And if any hiccups come about, then pull plug and stop it. But I think the introduction of money causes problems. Then the media rights and viewing rights and all these things start giving you a hassle. But I think free is the most important word there. Provide free viewing for people at home and keep them interested in the sport.
It is coming back as well. The autumn 2020 season, is it the 19th of September that the point-to-point season is due to resume?
Yeah, 19th. We have 39 meetings before Christmas. A lot of them are rescheduled from the spring that failed to get run because of the virus, and so there's a lot of racing now. There's a lot of horses in Ireland to run. There was over 1,000 horses with hunter certificates due to run that didn't get to run before the lockdown. So they're there, as well as possibly another 400 to 500 horses that hadn't been hunter certified at the time. So there's a vast amount of horses to run. We're going to have very, very competitive racing from September right through to Christmas, this autumn period, I'd say.
You're gagging to get back, I suspect.
Yeah. It's going to be very good with Delpagod, yeah.
Yeah, well, here, very best of luck with it, Derek, and thanks a lot for taking some time to chat to us today.
Thanks, Derek. Pleasure. Thanks, guys. Thank you very much.
That was Derek O'Connor there, who is one of our greatest ever amateur jockeys, and it will be very much part of that point-to-point circuit when it resumes in the middle of September. Just before we get on to your tip for the weekend, Johnny, I know you were down at the Curragh during the week, and this goes back to what we were just talking about, and the absence of spectators at race courses and, well, at sporting events around the country and around the world right now, and the real lack of atmosphere and just how surreal it all is. You were down at the Curragh during the week. You said it was a pretty strange atmosphere.
Yeah, just, because you have the backdrop of the Curragh. I visited Johnny Murtagh's yard yesterday morning, which is just in the outskirts of Kildare town, and John Levins's yard is right beside him, and it's just before you go into Kildare, and then it's quite near the Curragh, obviously, but it's just the backdrop when you think the Curragh is racing today with nobody there, and it's strange. And it was a really, really enjoyable morning. I was just doing a bit of promotion for Longines Irish Champions Weekend, which is on in 2 weekends' time now. So we had a couple of these stable visits: Donnacha O'Brien, Ado McGuinness, and Johnny Murtagh. But I tell you what, I came away with an idea, Nathan. I was like, if you could get a film crew to do a documentary of following the characters that go around the Curragh and meet at the gallops every morning, and do this for a year or less if you didn't have the year, it'd be absolutely fantastic TV. I think people who had no interest in racing will be riveted when you've the likes of Frank Oakes, who's in his 80s and he's still riding out his horse that won at Leopardstown the other day, and he might be his only horse in training. You've Willie McCreary coming in talking about football. You've Johnny Murtagh coming in having the banter with jockeys. You've all these characters just mingling in the Curragh, and you've the stories of the jockeys, stories of the trainers, stories of the workmen. I spoke to a guy yesterday who was from Hungary, and apparently he works at Johnny Murtagh, he's 29, very good soccer player in his day, and I was talking about the Bows game, and he was well versed on Hungarian football, because Bows are playing a Hungarian team, and you're asking him, how did you end up training here? And Johnny Murtagh then was telling me how he manages the local his daughter's Gaelic football teams, and it was just great atmosphere, and just the Curragh itself is this beautiful melting pot of people, and it's just strange that it's still kind of so limited in terms of what people can do, but it was a magical place to be, and Johnny's infectious enthusiasm. I think he's like 12 runners for a Champions Weekend, and it's hard to believe it's only 2 weeks away. And the Curragh is in its infancy in terms of redevelopment. It's Leopardstown's big flat meet of the season by a country stretch, and there'll be nobody there, unfortunately.
Why do you need somebody else to do this documentary, Johnny? You're the man with the connections. Get to it.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I don't know if the state broadcaster has enough money to throw at these things anymore.
There's other broadcasters, Johnny. There's other ways of making money.
I honestly think, I don't know if you remember, Hector did
You're right. We should get Hector to present it. Good thinking.
Hector did Only Fools Buy Horses, wasn't it? With Pat Flynn. And I think that might only have been one episode, or it was brief anyway, but it was really good watching. And I was sort of probably only getting into racing at the time, and it intrigued me. But just like to my mind as well, the story of the journeyman is a lot more interesting than the champion. And you get all these people who are just like, they come to the Curragh, they're working average horses, they're hoping to win an average race to keep the show on the road. And then you've the best of the best. Dermot Weld is coming in with his battalion of horses. And I don't know, Nathan, if anyone wants to give me free labour and free equipment for a year, I'd definitely consider it.
We'll see what we can do. I'm sure somebody will get in touch, Johnny. The Toad Irish Injured Jockeys Fund remains at €1,990, with Southern Cape fishing 8th of 8 at the Curragh last Saturday. This week, we have another €100 tote bet for the Irish Injured Jockeys Fund. Tote customers can now experience tote.ie, the new home of Irish pool betting. Log on to tote.ie to find out more. What you got for us, Johnny?
Yeah, I'm going for the last race at Navan tomorrow. This is a horse that I backed quite strongly when he was thrown at Sligo, when she was thrown at Sligo rather recently, and the meeting was called off because the ground, I think, was a little bit unsafe at one of the bends. Dashing Diamond, who was a real eye catcher last time at Killarney, runs in the 5:35 at Navan. It's maybe about 20-25 to 1. I think the one concern is the ground, but expecting a big run if she handles it. Certainly a lot better than Donica's filly last week, Donica's Coldwater, which must apologise for. It's hard to legislate for a run as disappointing as that.
All right, great stuff, Johnny. Thanks as always.
Heading to the homestead, back to Galway tonight, Nathan. So I'll see your dad there, and hopefully Galway United's FAI Cup dreams remain extant by the morning.
Well, you tell him I said hello.
I will.
And hopefully it goes better than the last Galway United match we were all at against Drogheda United, where the manager gets sacked, and you expect Paul Doolan to get the gig. And the Murphy family think John Caulfield to get the gig, and John Caulfield gets the gig. So is there going to be an uncomfortable tete-a-tete with yourself and John Caulfield this evening? Are you very much on board now?
As long as they win.
Cup tonight. All right. We'll hear about that over the weekend, I'm sure. Great stuff, Johnny. We might do the old Instagram live again if it goes to penalties. He's gone. All right, that is it for Friday Night Racing. It is live on our social channels every single Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock. You can catch it on the radio just after 8.
Friday Night Racing
on Off the Ball.
Brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment.